Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joe Flanagan. I'm the project manager for the Energy House 2 project here at the University of Salford. I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to today's session around PAS 2035 retrofit. I'm not going to give a lot of background about the project itself. I'm sure most of you who were here today were here last week for our introductory session, but anybody who wants to know more, go onto our website, which is energyhouse2.co.uk, and you can find all the information there. So before we start, just a few kind of housekeeping things. You all should have joined on mute, and if you wouldn't mind staying that way, please, that would help us greatly. We will be recording the sessions, so if you don't want to appear in the recording, switch off your camera. If you've got any questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll address those as we go along or at the end of each session, depends on the speaker, but we'll get around to the questions. And if you have got your mics on, let's have silence, please, and all phones on mute. If you've got any technical issues, just send a direct message to Helen, who's our organizer, and she will hopefully sort you out. So I've got three speakers today: David Pierpoint from the Retrofit Academy, Richard Fitton from the University of Salford, and Jonathan Atkinson from the Carbon Co-op, and they're all going to cover various aspects of PAS 2035. So I'm now going to hand over to David, who will give you the bulk of the presentation. David, over to you.
Thanks very much, Joe. Good to see you all. There's one or two names I recognise in the chat, and I'm probably going to pick on you with questions at various points because I think you should know your stuff about this. Okay, so we just go full screen. I've got somewhere between an hour and a half, and my job today is to go through to introduce you to PAS 2035 and specifically the role of the retrofit coordinator. At the Retrofit Academy, the organisation I run, we train retrofit coordinators. We've been doing that for many years now. We're just about to enrol our 1000th ever retrofit coordinator learner. So, you know, we know our way around that stuff. That's me. A year ago at Future Build, when we used to be allowed to see people in the flesh. I'm only known in the world for retrofit. I'm not known for anything else. And I get involved in all sorts of stuff, committees and working groups and stuff. It's all retrofit, and it's one of those where if you cut me in half like a piece of rock, you'd find that word retrofit in the middle. Now, what we're going to do over the next hour or so is I'm going to introduce you to this beat here, this very horrible looking diagram. I'm going to break that down to you into 6 simple steps. So you'll go away, I think, with a pretty clear idea of what they are and what's involved. I'm going to introduce you to the roles that PAS 2035 introduces and hopefully help you think about which of those roles might be the right one for you. And of course, you can actually be in multiple roles, so you might decide that you're a combination of various things, which is fine. And to help make this a bit less dull, we are going to show you this thing here, PAS 2035, the movie. This is the, well, we made it last year now, so it was last year's biggest movie event of the year, featuring interstitial condensation. And it tells the story of a Zoom meeting, a bit like this one, between 2 local authority officers and their installer. And they were involved, as you may have heard about, something called the LAD program, Local Authority Delivery Scheme program. And they were being told that they had to use PAS 2035, and sort of this goes through their journey with it, really. There's a little bit of lightheartedness in there as well. So more on that to come. Now, the Retrofit Academy publishes lots of guidance around PAS 2035. And a good place for you to start, or to go after this session, really, would be to visit our website, retrofitacademy.org, and download a couple of these documents. So PAS 2035, what is it and what does it mean for you, is a really good publication. It's been downloaded hundreds and hundreds of times and helped a lot of people who are quite confused about PAS 2035 to get a better understanding of it. The compliance process maps are a step-by-step guide to how you comply with the standard in whichever of these roles you're in. So a very dry bit of work, but a very important one. And then in the middle there, that's PAS 2035 itself. That is what it looks like. It's a British standard, sponsored by the Department for Business. And you can get 50% off it using that discount code that's on the bottom of your screen now. So it normally costs, I think, just on £200. You can get it for £100. Don't rush out and do that unless this is going to become important to what you do moving forwards. But I'm sure we'll pop that code in the chat later for you as well. Now, I'm going to ask Helen to launch the poll at this point. Do I have to come out of the presentation, Helen?
No, you don't. I shall launch it now.
So if you could launch it. We just wanted to get a picture from you today about how, where you currently stand with this thing. I mean, the first question relates to whole house retrofit. So what is your current knowledge of whole house retrofit? Just give an honest answer to that. And the second one is, what's your current knowledge? I suppose that should be understanding of the BSI PAS 2035 standard. So we're going to give you 20 to 30 seconds just to pick those two boxes, and then we'll share the results with you. And that will just help us steer where we need to pitch this to. I'm told by Joe and Nigel that you're all very knowledgeable and very intelligent. Apparently all people from the Northwest are. So have we got those poll results, Helen? Excellent. Great. Okay, so looks like we've got a couple of people with really good in-depth knowledge of whole house retrofit, which is great. A lot of people sort of saying average. So average wins there, 60%. Okay. And a few more people, that's encouraging. A few more people seem to have a comprehensive understanding of PAS 2035. 43% vague, 29% non-existent. So on that basis, I'll keep the PAS 2035 stuff at a fairly top level, so we don't try and cram it with detail. Thank you very much. I'm going to close that and move on. Okay, so there's that scary diagram. I have a scarier diagram for you later. This is the simplified version that you're seeing on screen here of PAS 2035. This was something developed by, it's the brainchild of a guy called Dr. Peter Rickaby, who's the technical director at the Retrofit Academy. He was also the technical author of PAS 2035, and he loves a flowchart with Peter. So a bit scary to begin with. Don't try and take it in now, but we are going to, by the end of this session, give you a good understanding of those 6 stages and these roles. Okay. Now, with the roles, it's probably a good idea to get a broad understanding of these now. The PAS aims to professionalize retrofit. Okay, so it is sort of the starting point for it was that we didn't have enough highly skilled people involved in most retrofit projects, and most retrofits were sort of measures based, so replacing gas boilers with new gas boilers, or applying external wall insulation to the outside of a wall, or an individual thing often, or maybe 1 or 2 things. And what PAS 2035 wants us to do is to change that to a whole house retrofit approach, which we'll explain later on. And to do that, it says that you need people who are appropriately qualified and appropriately skilled to fulfill certain roles on a project. So we have a retrofit advisor, who is somebody who provides advice to a homeowner or a resident or a social landlord. Then we have a retrofit coordinator, which is probably the most important of the roles, because it's the person who's responsible for ensuring that project complies with PAS 2035 from start to finish. So they're a project manager from the beginning of a project to the end of a project. A retrofit assessor, who is a domestic energy assessor with a little bit of upskilling, whose job it is to carry out the assessment, which tells the coordinator and others about the existing condition of that property, and gives them the data they need to make some decisions about it. Then we have a retrofit designer with the amusing moustache and a purple bow tie, who is an architect or other design professional. They're responsible for what architects normally are responsible for, really. And engineers, they're for specifying and detailing and architectural drawings and and other things that these deep retrofit projects absolutely do need. Then we have a retrofit installer whose job it is to install the measures and ensure that they're working properly and well commissioned and handing them over to a resident. And then we have a retrofit evaluator whose job it is to make sure that that project has done what it was meant to do, and that there are no nasty unintended consequences with it. So that's how PAS 2035 lays out the rules. But why do we have it in the first place? One got back about 5 years ago now. The minister's post bag was becoming increasingly filled with letters of complaint from people complaining about what was happening to their homes through funding programs. A lot of it was through projects funded through the energy company obligation. And if you remember back, there was also something called the Green Deal. So there were lots of problems with those projects, and the government got fed up of it, and they said, right, we're going to have a review into this, and they commissioned Dr. Peter Bonfield to carry. Okay, can you hear me? I've just been told I was muted.
We can, David, sorry.
Oh, right, okay. I've been talking to myself for 10 minutes.
No.
Oh, okay. So the Each Home Counts review was very much a root and branch review of the whole sector, to identify what was going wrong and to make recommendations about how that should put right in the future. It's well worth a read sometime. It's on the internet. You can download that. I'm just going to focus on two of its recommendations. The first recommendation was that it said that householders clearly don't trust the supply chain to deliver retrofit for them. There was a lack of trust. They said that we need a quality mark for this sector, which householders will recognise, and if someone is approved by that, operating under that quality mark, they'll know they'll be able to trust them. And a couple of years later, that became Trustmark. You may know of Trustmark, government endorsed quality standards. They've been around for a while, but the main thrust of what they do now is this role as the retrofit quality mark. Now, underneath Trustmark sit the accreditation schemes for both individuals, so those roles that we've just looked at. So they're operated by the likes of Elmhurst and Stroma and others that you may have heard of, and also the installer schemes that the installers have to be members of. So you may know SEGA or SWIGA or NIC-EIC. So that's a better arrangement. It used to be very fragmented. This all sits under Trustmark, and Trustmark are responsible for quality and standards. The second key recommendation was that they said there needs to be a code of conduct for the industry. How should it go about doing what it's meant to do? And the government, following Each Home Counts, commissioned BSI to develop new standards for retrofit. There are two key ones. So there's BSI PAS 2035, which is the overarching standard for retrofit. And then there's BSI PAS 2030, which is the installer standard for retrofit. Don't let that confuse you. The reason there's two is that PAS 2030 has been around for about 10 years, or so, just under 10 years. So it's around. The easiest way of looking at it, though, is just to think of PAS 2030 as being a chapter in the book, which is PAS 2035. You can't have one without the other. Okay, so they're effectively one of the same thing. The Trustmark requires full compliance with PAS 2035. In the eco sector, there's a transitionary period until this July, but that sector over the last 12 months has fast been moving over to this new standard and getting lots of training done and stuff and getting ready. Other government funded programs of late have also required compliance with PAS 2035, so that the LAD scheme, the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, and the upcoming home upgrade grants, they will all require PAS 2035. So clearly that's the direction of travel. Now, that Each Home Counts review was full of examples of this stuff, bad retrofit, and we see too much of this. We still see too much of it now. This is what we need to stop, because until we do stop it, those householders won't trust us and the supply chain won't scale up. So most of the defects we find from poor retrofit revolve around damp, moisture, condensation. You can see these pictures are post retrofit, by the way, not pre. So these aren't problems we're solving. These are problems we're we're making worse or introducing sometimes. You can see here a very, very sodden wet wall with external render on it, which has resulted from a bridge between the damp-proof course and the wall system, which is a very common thing. Now, if you're finding it hard to relate to these pictures, or if you don't recognise this to be representative, I challenge you to drive around a local social housing estate in your area. I do this every time I take my kids to school. If there's been any degree of what might be called retrofit, particularly external wall insulation applied, on a wet day, take a look at the walls. And you're very likely to find that there's darkening patches or wet spots, quite obvious to the naked eye. Okay, so that's what we're looking to avoid. Now, we're going to go to Craggingshire, our city council, in a minute, just to introduce you to the cast first. We have Joy, who's an asset manager, so they own their own housing stock at this local authority. She's a trainee retrofit coordinator, so she's on our course. She's quite experienced, been around the block with retrofit a few times, and she's got a challenge often called managing upwards with Bill, who is the property director, so her boss. He doesn't know that much about retrofit. It's a new thing for him, really, but he's got lots of power. And he's a good mate with this guy, Sean, our installer. Now, I do want to stress to you that Sean is a good guy, right? Like most installers. So this isn't designed to just, beat installers up. There are reasons that things happen the way they are at the minute. And Sean, like most installers, is very well intentioned and believes he's doing things the right way. So please bear that in mind. Okay.
I just can't understand it. We had such high hopes for this lad scheme. How could these retrofits go so badly wrong? We spent £20 million trying to improve people's homes, but the chief exec's inbox is crammed full of letters of complaint. Residents are saying what we've done has actually made things worse. It's going to cost us millions to put right.
Oh, I don't mean to say I told you so, but...
What?
Well, I did say that we needed to apply past 2035 at our planning meeting before we started, but you said no.
Yes, you did. But do you honestly think if we'd have done that, the outcome would have been any better? I mean, it's quite clear to me the contractors don't know what they're doing. It's their fault, we'll blame them.
Well, and where does that get us, Bill? I mean, what's that quote? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result, something like that.
Get Sean on here and we'll get to the bottom of it.
Okay, so that was a glimpse into the future, really, that bit of the video. So this is, we're going to go back in time in a minute and investigate why they made that decision not to use PAS 2035. For those of you who have heard of PAS 2035 or engaged or are already active in this sector, you're likely to have some current perspective. And if any of you are brave enough to unmute your microphone or use the chat, tell us what you think, what are those current perspectives of it? What are the positive things you've heard? What are the negative things you've heard? I can't see the chat, so I'm hoping. If there are any comments in there, Joel, let me know.
I think one of the things from our point of view, David, is we kind of looked at this sort of thing in the past, and PAS 2035 seems very, very complicated and therefore actually daunting to try and implement.
Complicated, yes. I think that's a common one. Sorry, who was that talking there?
Sorry, Mark Harrison.
Hello, Mark. Yes, yeah, and we hear that all the time. Very complex. Yeah, thank you very much. Any others?
Hi, it's Salma from PT.
Hi.
It's more complicated, yes, but it's also more structured. So you do have a definitive path and process to work to. So I think it's an improvement in the long run.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any more?
You've got one on the chat, massive
What's that?
skill shortage and no desire by trades to learn as they're too busy with current climate.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic. Okay. We picked up the main ones there. Yep. Don't know what.
Here. I've not used PAS 2023. I'm just an old-fashioned surveyor that you went in and you did the property up sort of thing. What I noticed mainly was the amount of people involved. You could have a meeting with all these individuals,
Yeah.
instead of a meeting of one or two people. And the more people in the meeting, the worse the meeting appears to be to me.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's just on the face of it, never having used it.
Yes, that's a very good point. Thank you. So, and we're going to come on to that actually in a minute, because there's no need for it to be that way necessarily. But so, I mean, the points I had on these current perspectives just, and they reflect pretty much what's just been said. So in terms of positives, generally people can see that this is about trying to raise quality and standards, having a more robust process, as I think it was Felmer said, introducing professionalism into this space, and professionals. So the gentleman there who's a surveyor, PAS 2035 absolutely aims to bring architects, surveyors, designers into the retrofit world, and previous funding regimes had very much excluded them. And then in terms of negatives, so we had complexity. No one mentioned cost, but that usually gets mentioned. So people see there's a big compliance cost with all of this. And then the issue about capacity, supply chain capacity, skills, labour shortages, and they are just realities, aren't they? There's no point in us pretending that they're not real. There's a few more positives that perhaps aren't the current perspectives, but where we need to get to. So I don't think PAS 2035 is a complicated standard. It's just a new standard, and anything that's new is seen as being complicated. It's actually pretty simple, and that's what we try and do in these sessions, is keep it as simple as we possibly can. We need to make it very lean and efficient, and the reason for that is we've got to do 27 million of these bloody things in the next 29.5 years. Okay, and I'm not sure if the government have made their announcement yet. It was trailed this morning that we've got to get to 78% CO2 savings by 2038, I think it was now. So they're constantly bringing the goalpost forward, and we're going to need an industrial retrofit machine if we're going to deliver on anything like this scale. And it should give us that framework to create that capable supply chain for retrofit that can do that. Whilst it's all feast and famine, we never get a fair crack at that. So we're hoping this gives us a better, more stable bedrock. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to go to Cragganshires planning meeting, where they first discussed whether they should adopt PAS 2035 or not.
Look, Bayes want us to use this new PAS 2035 standard to manage this project. What's it all about, Sean?
It's a load of red tape, and look, it's optional, and I would avoid it like the plague.
Yeah, but what is it?
PAS 2035. It's a load of flow charts and processes, but it's just too complicated. The guys will never wear it. It's all too academic. It's not what energy efficiency is all about, Bill.
Hang on, I've been learning about this on my retrofit course, and to be honest, I thought it made a lot of sense.
Sense? We can't make head or tail of it, love. It's a load of rubbish. They'll get rid of it before you know it, and we'll be back to normal.
Hang on, look, I agree. It is a bit tricky to get your head around it at first, but we've often had problems in the past with retrofit. I think we should at least think it through.
I had a briefing with the sustainability consultants, and it made my head spin. So much jargon. Unintended this, interstitial or ischnitional that, I can't even say it. Ventilation the other. There's a load of hot air. They told me I should aim to Enefit with an energy sprung. I mean, whew.
Look, Bill, you get the money, give us the walls to clad, and we'll have them all done by the end of the year. It's how it's always been, and there's nothing wrong with it. When have we? No, When have I ever let you down?
Well, hang on a minute, Sean. The Brockville estate you did is full of mould and damp, and it's only 2 years since you rendered all those walls and told us you didn't need to ventilate them.
That wasn't us. It's the residents not opening the windows and drying the washing indoors. What can we do about that?
Well, what about the Craighall development, where you've clad the building, but you've not moved the flipping windows in line, and you've left a gap at the DPC rather than insulating down to the foundation?
There was no money to move the windows. And anyway, the funding rule. Listen, the funding rules don't say you have to. Same with the DPCs. Would have meant digging up the foundations. The important thing is we did the walls. It's what you paid us for.
But those people's lives are worse now than they were before, Sean. They've got health problems, they've got asthma, loads of mould in the kitchens and the bathrooms.
Listen, there's nothing more we could have done. We delivered as per your procurement. Look, I've got to go. I've got real problems on site. I've got to go. Right. What do I press here? Stop.
Oh, Sean, come on.
Stop video. Has it stopped? I can't see now.
Yes, Sean, you've gone, mate.
Wow. He's got a point though, hasn't he? I mean, we did, ask him to install EWI, and that's what he did. Unless we get better at specifying what outcomes we want, we are never going to change that.
Look, we've got until March to get the money spent for this PASS 2035 thing, but that's just optional, okay? We don't have time to get to grips with it. Let's ignore it and stick with a tried and trusted.
Trusted?
Look, there's no way you can convince me. The cost of compliance with this new standard is totally unrealistic. It's overcomplex and we don't have the time. Okay, think, Bill, think. Tell procurement we're going to use the funding on the Craghill estate, yeah. We want to appoint a contractor to do the external cladding on the non-trads, and we'll use IWI for all the Victorian terraces. Lag the lofts and fill the cavities, get some PV on the roof and a heat pump at the rear. It's not rocket science. Sean could do all that.
Oh, an open competition then?
Can you get on with it, please?
Bill made some executive decisions there. So that's why they made the decisions they did. And we're going to consider what the outcome might be in a minute. Now, we talked there about not moving the windows. Okay, so again, you can't relate to what I'm showing you on screen here. Drive around your local council estate, and where you see DWI, see if you can ever find one where they've moved the windows in line with the insulation layer. So what is standard practice here is that the window, which is the green rectangle, is left where it was before. So in the existing wall, which is the left-hand purple rectangle, and the right-hand purple rectangle, that's the layer of external wall insulation that's been added in. And you can see it's cold outside, warm inside. Where that join isn't appropriately detailed, there's a horrible thermal bridge created, and that means that you will end up with moisture ingress at that point through thermal bridging. And that will happen all the time. It won't just happen sometimes, it will happen all the time. And yet that is very much standard practice. Whereas good practice, which is moving that window, the green rectangle, into the insulation layer, you can see there, the thermographic image says that thermal bridge is all but eliminated. Okay, so we need to move towards doing more of this stuff that we do on the right-hand side. That's becoming the norm. And the reason that's so important, as well as leaving residents with thermal bridges, not that they'll ever know that, but they'll be left with damp. It's because we only get one chance to do this. What we're trying to achieve here, the mission is to decarbonise our housing stock by whatever, 2038 or 2048 or 2050, whatever it is. Doing it the way you're seeing on the left there, it's all going to have to be redone, isn't it? Okay, so if we think about Bill's approach, what do we think will happen? So Bill's executive decision that they'll install all those measures on an estate without particularly doing any preparatory work or investigation or specification or any of those things. What do we think might happen? That's the first
Alma
question.
from PT, they'll end up with the same damp problems.
Yeah, they will. Absolutely, they will. So whilst you're on, what's he not doing then, Thelma, that perhaps he should be doing?
More detailed design work. So design details for the windows and other areas that might need it.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. Okay, so yeah, it's those sorts of things, and we're going to look at the PAS process in a minute. But you know, the simple method is, you know, let's survey a building properly. Let's understand it and what needs to happen to it, and consider all the options, weigh up those options, design them properly, install them properly, and check that they're working. That kind of stuff. But it's not the way we've done it, amazingly. It's the way we moved to doing it. So yeah, we talk about these 6 stages of PAS 2035. This is the more complicated version of the diagram you saw earlier. So step 1 is all about deciding what it is we're trying to achieve. Step 2 is deciding how risky it is to do that. Step 3 is carrying out a detailed dwelling assessment, which Richard's going to talk to us about in detail. Step 4 is about doing the planning and design work. So it's a big rectangle that used to be totally missing from this diagram, in effect. Step 5 is about installing stuff and handing it over to the residents. And step 6 is about monitoring those projects and evaluating them properly. Okay. And then bestriding it all, like a Colossus, is our retrofit coordinator, Joy. Okay. She is responsible for everything from one end to the other. So the gentleman who was concerned about having to have too many people in the meetings, I think probably you just need to have your retrofit coordinator in those meetings rather than do all the individuals. But we'll see how that pans out. Now, we'll pay our next visit to Craggingshire.
Crag-Hall is a disaster. What am I missing here, Joy? How would this PAS 2035 thing have changed things?
Okay, well, let's work through the retrofit process and keep it simple, yeah? Tell you what, Bill, describe to me the process as it works just now.
Right, okay. Well, we get the funding. We get energy assessors to do a quick survey, and they tell us what the software says we should do.
Right.
We decide we're going to spend it on wall cladding, boilers, solar panels, etc. Then we procure a contractor to deliver it. Pretty much leave them to get on with it.
Yeah, and we always deliver on time and on budget.
Okay, okay. So let's just compare that then to this PAS 2035. Now, as I understand it, PAS says there are 6 stages to a retrofit project, yeah? So stage 1 is about pulling together information about the property and deciding what exactly is it that we're trying to achieve. It's also about talking to residents and understanding their lifestyle, you know, how they live, what it's like to live in their properties right now, yeah? So it's about giving them then some good advice on how things can be better if we make these changes to their homes. So we then take stock and lay out what it is exactly we are trying to achieve. So, for example, it could be how much we're trying to reduce their annual energy bill, or how much CO2 we want to save, that, you know, that kind of thing. And this is called our intended outcomes.
Doesn't sound unreasonable, but who's making these decisions?
Well, well, the client is. Well, okay, so us on our own stock and the residents in their own homes. But they have to get good advice from somebody impartial. So someone who has their best interests at heart. Now, the PAS says that needs to be somebody who's qualified in giving energy advice or a retrofit coordinator.
Retrofit? Is it a retrofit whatinator?
I know. A retrofit coordinator. So bear with me. These are qualified experts who understand retrofitting and all the risks that come with that. And they will manage the project from start to finish and make sure it delivers what it's supposed to deliver. So the PAS says they have to act to protect the client's interest and the public interest. Otherwise, they are in trouble. So they've got to be seen to be doing the right thing, which isn't always the same as doing what's most profitable.
A retrofit coordinator. Oh, I love this one, Bill. They're like rocking horse droppings or unicorns. You can never find them. There's hardly any of them around.
Well, except there is though, Sean, because there's over 200 fully qualified coordinators now, and loads of them are freelance. There's plenty to support a scheme like Lads, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And anyway, you could have had one in your own team, Sean.
Oh, no.
You've known these standards have been coming for 18 months, and it's really clear that every PAS project needs a retrofit coordinator.
Well, I'll tell you what, Joy, I've been busy anyway. I've been busy delivering.
Yeah. Okay,
You
sure.
can call me
Sure.
Joy.
All right, mate. All right. So what is it these retrofit coordinators do then?
Well, like I said, their job is to manage the project from one end to the other, cradle till grave, and they make sure everything is done in compliance with PAS 2035. So that means from advice through to assessment, design, planning, installation, and post-completion. Their job is to link everything together and make sure it delivers what it's flipping supposed to. Literally, everything runs through them.
So the coordinator works for the installer.
Well, they can do, but we'd probably see that as a conflict of interest. So it'd be better to appoint somebody independent. Or you could train your own in-house coordinator like I'm doing.
Oh, sounds a bit like being a busybody to me, Joy. What do we need some jobs were telling us what we should be doing? We know what we're doing.
And we'll find out. Okay, so we're going to start, ladies and gentlemen, by looking at these intended outcomes, phase one. Now, this can take a different form on different projects. And in the real world, it's perfectly possible these steps will happen in a slightly different order. So, you know, this is a flowchart designed by someone working with theory rather than working with reality. But what you're seeing on screen here, or here rather, are extracts from something called our PAS 2035 templates that we developed at the Retrofit Academy. We train retrofit coordinators in how to use these templates to deliver their projects. And you can see there a range of possible intended outcomes from a project. So, you know, the first one there, reduction in energy use, reduction in emissions associated with energy use, improving internal comfort, improving indoor air quality, eliminating condensation, damp and mold, and so on and so forth, or achieving a specific increase in energy rating, which is particularly important to social landlords. Okay, so it's simply just a case of having conversations with clients and deciding what it is they want to achieve, so that an appropriate plan and appropriate budget can be developed for them on that basis. Okay, now, who does this? This is the key diagram, really. So the PAS breaks all projects down into one of three risk pathways. There's low, medium, and high. And also, as we discussed, into these 6 stages. Okay, so, and it says who can do what in each of those stages. So starting with assessment, it says on a low risk project that has to be carried out by a domestic energy assessor or a retrofit assessor. Or it can be a retrofit coordinator. So just on that particular type of project, the coordinator doesn't have to be a qualified DEA as well as being a coordinator. But on Path B and Path C, it can only be an assessor, an energy assessor. And then on our second column there, the strategic piece can only be done by a coordinator. So the development of a medium-term plan for the property or the improvement option evaluation, which we're going to look at in a minute, can only be done by them. With design, it says that qualified designers such as architects and surveyors and construction managers and people of that nature, that they fulfill that role. Apart from on Path A and Path B projects, where certain kinds of retrofit coordinator can also fulfill that role, albeit only if they're competent to do so. And then installers, this bit that Sean says he knows what he's doing with, and he does, they do the installation bit, and that's the bit that they do. It's overseen by the coordinator, but it's delivered by the installer. And then the monitoring and evaluation piece is done by an evaluator. Let me tell you, there's no such thing as a retrofit evaluator, and there won't be for some time because we don't have a British standard for it yet. So at the minute, PAS 2035 says the retrofit coordinator does that job, and we'll come on to a bit more detail about that in a minute. So as was stressed in the video there, the retrofit coordinator's job is to take overall responsibility. Everything runs through them, making sure that the project's delivered in accordance with PAS 2035. But it also said that they have to act on behalf of the client, just as an architect would on behalf of a resident. Okay, so your job is to be on their side, and it's to represent their interests. Now, there is potentially there a conflict of interest, because the PAS also says that a coordinator can work for anybody. So the retrofit coordinator might be on the payroll of the installer, for example, and the installer may have an interest in installing certain measures over others, or what have you. So that puts that coordinator in a quite a tricky position sometimes. And it will, over the next couple of years, be very interesting to see how it settles down into who ends up, what model of coordinator ends up working. You know, will there be those in-house people, whether they're working for an installer or working for a social landlord, for example, so that they can keep that role, that public conscience role in their own organisation. We're seeing lots of people from that sector train at the moment, or working for the installer, being employed, or indeed being freelance and independent, which is another quite common model. We don't know the answer yet. It'll be interesting to see. What we have learned through research is that coordinators come in a range of different shapes and sizes, and this is a really good thing, actually. It's really good that we're getting coordinators who are, you know, specialists or chartered professionals on the one hand, because sometimes you need them. Sometimes you've got complex jobs where you really need those people involved. Other times, less complex jobs, you don't need people with such high day rates and such high levels of expertise. So there's a room for both. And then in the middle somewhere, we think in terms of expertise and cost is these sort of local authority or RTL in-house coordinators. Now, you'll hear, it's already been mentioned that there are capacity issues. I just want to talk to you a little bit about coordinators, because there's a few myths really about that. In the video, it said we've got 200 graduates. That was filmed last November. We're now up to 320 graduates from our programme. So there are 320 retrofit coordinators. We've got 1,000 learners enrolled at the moment. So the number of graduate, the pipeline is coming through. And we think for the current schemes that the government has currently got running, eco, social housing, decarbonisation and LADS, we think that's about right, maybe slightly under actually. Now we've done a bit more analysis. We may be a couple of hundred short, but you know, the numbers are going up all the time. So there are probably more than you think, and we can help introduce you to coordinators if that's helpful to you. Okay, we're going to go on to step 2 here now, which is risk assessment. People often tell me this is complicated. It's not. Even I can get my head around this. Risk assessment is about deciding how risky a project is, and all the things that may be discussed, all the variables that could get discussed, they're all debated at length in the PAS 2035 working groups and pulled together in the table you hear, which is extracted from PAS 2035. So you'll see there are 5 criteria, and the retrofit coordinator's job is to weigh up that project and provide an assessed grade for each one. And they're just a matter of fact. So, you know, the first one, the number of dwellings to be improved. You know, if there are fewer than 10, it's an A, and if there's more than 30, it's a C. Then there's number of measures per dwelling. So if it's 1 or 2, then it's an A. More than 5 is a C. And then the inherent technical risk of the measures themselves, which I'll come on to, the combination of measures, which I'll also come on to, and then what the form of the buildings are, because we know that treating certain types of buildings are riskier than others. And all we do, once we put an assessed grade in each box, is we look at what the highest single grade is, and that determines what the risk pathway is going to be and how we're going to manage that project. So you might have A's in all the boxes, but C in another, and it will be a C, and there's no way around it. Okay, let's see how they approach this in Craigieshire.
Okay, I get that we need somebody in charge that knows what they're doing, one of these retrofit coordinators, but this is all sounds really expensive.
Exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, well, not really, because the first step can be done over the phone and through desk research, to be fair, and actually so can the second step, you know, the risk assessment, because that's where we triage projects as either path A, B or C to decide how we should manage them.
Well, I told you, this sounds really complicated. I've seen the flow charts. They're like a London Underground map.
Exactly.
It's real, honestly, it's really simple. All you have to do is plug on how many dwellings we're dealing with, when they were built, how many measures we're installing, and how risky those measures are. No, honestly, it's just a series of simple facts. We decide on an overall risk pathway based on the highest grade in any category. So okay, take Craghall then. Because there are 100 properties, it's always going to be a Path C project. The greater the volume, the greater the risk of getting it wrong and making mistakes.
These bloody Path C projects are unbelievable. Listen, John, how can putting render on walls be high risk? It's not. It all comes with a 25-year warranty anyway. These EWI projects, they should be Path A at least, at best.
Path A? Right,
Yeah.
hang on. Let me just hang on. Let me show you this. Yeah, see that? Wake up and smell the coffee, Sean.
All right.
Okay, so perhaps not as straightforward as Sean thinks. So the inherent technical risk of measures is all laid out in PAS 2035. Again, no room for debate. You find your measure on that list. I think this is what we're going to install. It tells you what its inherent risk is. And then the other side of it is the combination of measures. So combining certain measures with others is riskier than others. Sometimes it's totally inappropriate. And the matrix on the right-hand side there, a bit like one of those football fixture planners we all used to have on our walls as kids. It's got all the measures along the top, all the measures along the bottom. You find where one meets the other. That tells you what the inherent risk of that interaction is. And again, it's nice and straightforward. Richard's going to go into more detail about this, so I won't dwell on it. The risk pathways are just keeping it nice and simple. It's like a ski slope analogy. You know, when we learn to ski, we go on the nursery slopes, the green slopes. That's what they're like, our Path A project. So it's all light to touch. Decide this isn't too risky, not too bad. Certain things aren't mandatory. Things like medium-term plans and improved option evaluation aren't mandatory on Path A projects, whereas they are on both Path B and Path C, and they're like our blue slopes we go on to Path B. So, and an awful lot of projects I think are going to go into Path B. So this is going to become the norm really of how we approach it. Path C, you know, it's tougher and it's it's like your red ski slopes, and you need lots of professional input throughout for lots of reasons. Again, you're seeing an example here from our PAS 2035 templates of a risk assessment carried out. It's criteria one is, you know, they're all A's. We're keying in the measures here that we're going to install. It's looking up data from that measures interaction matrix. And in a minute, we're going to get to the bottom. It's going to calculate our risk pathway with this. You can see it's a Path B, and the reason being it's the number of measures per dwelling. I think, yes, well, all of those three there actually. Okay, so there are a lot of comments coming in the chat, Joe, so do feel free to interrupt me if there's any questions.
Yeah, I'll just interrupt now.
Yeah,
it's an appropriate point. I had a couple of questions which seems to me quite interesting. I think you might have covered them slightly earlier. Somebody's saying that is there a conflict of interest between coordinator and evaluator?
Well,
if the coordinator is also the evaluator.
Yeah, there could be, but we are coming on to talk about that actually. But okay. Yeah, I mean, the rule of thumb is if things are found to be, if the resident's happy with everything, there's no conflict. If they're not, then there is, and you'd need to bring in an independent coordinators to do the evaluation. But we are covering this off in a little while.
I've got another question here about is MCS installer accreditation the same as PAS 2035 installer accreditation?
Well, it's MCS accreditation is the same as Trustmark accreditation, and yes, it applies to renewable energy technologies. So you know, the funding regimes require you to be Trustmark accredited if you deal with the fabric of the building, basically, and MCS accredited or whatever the word is for renewables.
I just finally, a few people have commented they're having a bit of difficulty seeing some of the slides. I mean, I am myself on a laptop here, so we'll be able to circulate the slides afterwards, won't we, David? I think we're okay with doing that.
The slides, yes. The video, not so much. It's too big
Yeah.
to send, but the slides.
Yeah, but we'll
So
circulate.
we're not seeing it full screen. I don't normally have a problem with that.
Well, I think some people have had connection problems.
Okay.
And there are some of the slides I've got a lot of detail in.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Thanks, Joe.
Okay.
Okay. So this next stage, stage 3, is the dwelling assessment, which Richard's going to go into lots of detail about. I'm just going to give you the top line. So the PAS says this has to be undertaken by a qualified DEA. Every dwelling must be assessed. So it's not good enough to do what Bill did earlier and say, well, we'll do one, and that tells us everything we need to know about the 100 that are similar to it. Very importantly, the PAS limits what the role of the retrofit assessor is to collecting data. And the reason for that is that there were, in the olden days, there were too many underqualified people making decisions that they weren't qualified to do. So it's about collecting data and providing that data to people who are suitably qualified, meeting the needs, meeting the requirements of the retrofit coordinator. The specific characteristics of the assessment are determined by the risk assessment itself. So it tells you certain things you must do as you go up the risk pathway. Okay.
Okay, what's next?
Well, stage 3, which is the whole dwelling assessment.
Ah, you mean when you get an EPC report?
Well, no, because that's way too superficial to be useful. The idea is that before deciding what the plan is, you need to understand what you're starting with. It's down to this retrofit coordinator to decide what they need to know from the assessment. Sometimes, you know, yeah, a quick visit might do, but usually these assessments, they can take up to half a day.
Half a day?
Yeah.
My mate's an EPC assessor and they can issue a report in 15 minutes. He does about 20 a day, much cheaper.
Well, I'm sorry, Bill, but there is no way we can make the right decisions for a property in the long term based on duff information. I mean, if this were your house, would you be happy with that?
No, probably not. No, but this is the way the funding works. There's not enough margin in it for all this stuff to be done well.
Well, it comes down to what you're trying to achieve, I guess, Bill. I mean, I'm not being funny, but hasn't our mayor committed us to achieving net zero by 2030? Isn't that what we're trying to achieve?
Your point being?
My point being, we've got 75,000 homes locally, yeah, and 10 years to get them to net zero. How many times will we get to retrofit them in the next decade? Once, right? So let's do it once, do it well, get it right first time. Plus, you can use your Green Home Grant voucher to pay for a proper assessment by a qualified retrofit assessor. It's the only sensible place to start with these retrofits.
Fair point. Okay. So you pull all this data together, then what?
So there's our EPC, our old friendly EPC. You'll all have seen these at some point. You've got one of your own house or you're in the sector. There's a lot of debate about their value, and I think it's fair to say that they're problematic. They're certainly not a basis for making decisions about what should happen to that property moving forwards. And unfortunately, we say that, and at the bottom of it, the bit that people don't really know is there sometimes is it tells you what the actions you can take to save money and make your home more energy efficient are. And often that has been the basis of the decisions made, what measures should be installed. It doesn't tell you anything about in what order or sequence or what the benefit of that will be. Well, it tells you typical savings over 3 years. But it's the reason there's a problem with it is that the software used to generate those certificates is something called RDSAP, Reduced Data SAP. And that includes a lot of assumptions about a building which are usually not borne out in practice. There's a lot of data points which aren't collected about a building, and it just means that we make poor decisions based on poor data. Okay, so at the Retrofit Academy, and this isn't, PAS 2035 doesn't say don't use RDSAP. It does say if you use RDSAP, recognise that there are limitations with it and consider using alternatives. Now, we don't expect that the norm anytime soon is going to be not using RDSAP, but we would hope that it's in the fullness of time that it will. Now, when we deliver retrofit projects ourselves through our consultancy business, we use this thing here on the right-hand side. It's called PHPP, the Passive House Planning Package. And you can see this is a very, very detailed model, which is drawing upon information collected in a survey. The survey takes around about 3 to 5 hours, depending on the property, and there's a very detailed set of data that we ask our surveyors to collect. It gives us a very accurate picture of that property and helps us make very good decisions about what we need to do in order to reduce the heat demand in that property to the lowest possible level, or to the target level anyway, and within the budget. So that might be something to investigate. There are alternatives too. So we're making good progress here. Step 4 is all about planning and design, and this is where the coordinator really comes into their own. There are 3 stages to this. Step 1 is an improvement option evaluation. Step 2 is creating a medium-term plan. And step 3 is creating an appropriate design solution for that property. We're going to look at those in a little bit of detail now. But let's see how it goes down in Craigengshire.
Then you move to stage 4, which is planning and design.
Design? We're not building the bloody shard here, just a few energy efficient measures. Design, honestly.
Right, like I said, Bill, you know, we get one shot at this, don't we? So let's get it right first time, eh?
Yeah, but who the hell is going to pay for all this, Joy?
Well, you are, Bill. And do you know why? Because if we balls this up, it's going to cost a whole lot more to put it right than to pay for an architect to help get it right in the first place. There's a scheme in Preston just now that is so bad that to put it right, the cost is going to run into flipping gazillions. And you, come on, Bill, you know that Craghall could easily go the same way if we don't act.
Fair point, fair point. So we might get fewer measures for our money initially and spend more on assessment and design at the front end.
Yeah.
Right, okay, I see that. So what happens next?
Well, the retrofit coordinator receives all the data and a report from the assessor.
Telling him what he should do.
Well, no, he'll get an advice report telling him what the software says he should do, but it's absolutely down to the coordinator to decide if that's what's really appropriate, because under the PAS, the assessor can't make recommendations because they're not qualified.
So these coordinators, they know their stuff then?
Oh, flipping right, they do. They've had to do quite a meaty course and qualifications. They've got I think it's a level 5 diploma in retrofit coordination and risk management, and it takes them weeks to study it. Plus, they've already got to have lots of experience. Many of these energy assessors, they've only had a few days training, so they just aren't able to make them kind of decisions.
Right. So what do they do next?
Well, they weigh up the options, discuss it with the client and agree a plan. But then here's where the clever bit comes in.
You mean the complicated bit?
No, not complicated at all. They create a bespoke plan for that building to get it as low a carbon position as possible over a period of, say, about 20 years. And that's called a medium-term improvement plan. This lays out what measures they plan to install and in what order. A bit like a service for your car, but, you know, for your house. And under the lads, we might get, say, what, 10, 20k for a property, yeah? Well, you know, that is nowhere near enough to do a full retrofit, right? So our plan needs to lay out what the right first steps are and lay out what we need to come back to later.
Joy. Just stop there. That's not how it works. We fund measures. We get the grant funding and we allocate it through our supply chain. We don't create retrofit plans, do we?
Measures their plan.
No, they don't at the minute, but that's what we're going to start doing a lot of over the next few years. Let's look at these improvement option evaluations first. And again, you've seen the Retrofit Academy's templates here. So these are a tool that help us weigh up what the best options are, what the measures are, and what combination of measures we should use. It tells us what sequence we should be doing those things in, and ensuring that we don't create a no regrets pathway, or we do create a no regrets pathway. So we're not, for example, doing those walls now, but leaving the windows where they are. We should be doing both at the same time. It evaluates the carbon cost effectiveness, the future fuel costs, and the payback period. So that's all calculated for you. And then that information, once you've made those decisions, is fed into this thing, the medium-term improvement plan or retrofit plan. Again, this is the TRA template you're seeing here. There's lots of different versions of this kicking around, I'm sure. This is your route to optimal retrofit. So how can we get this house to a net zero position, or as close to it as we possibly can over the next 50 years? It's bespoke for each property. It usually, because we don't usually have enough money in one hit to do it, involves staged retrofits over a 25-year time horizon, factoring in future trigger points, like the residents here are going to have a baby in a few years, or are likely to, or their kids are going to leave home for university, or what have you. There's lots and lots of trigger points. And then all of these improvement plans are then lodged with the Trustmark data warehouse. So it doesn't matter who lives in that property. In the future, that plan belongs to the property and will be fully accessible via that data warehouse. Okay, so this is beginning to happen, not in large numbers yet, but it is beginning to happen. Right, so we've got a bad habit that Joy wants us to shake off.
And that is the bad habit that we have got to wean ourselves off of, Bill. Sean, remember what you said about the EWI and the windows? Yeah? Well, you're right, aren't you? That is exactly what we procured you to do.
Yeah.
But every time you clad a wall and leave the glazing as it was, you create a thermal bridge, don't you? And I mean every single time.
Thermal bridge. Here we go. Job.
Exactly.
No, I'm sorry, Bill. Hang on. Okay, let me put it a different way then. How about instead of a thermal bridge, we say something like, we're going to do something that will guarantee A, that the home will have issues with moisture, and B, we'll have to spend £1 gazillion putting it right.
Oh, okay. Replacing windows is expensive, and we only did replacement double glazing at Craighill 10 years ago. Let's leave them where they are.
In which case, we don't do the EWI then, Sean. How does that sound?
Thanks, Sean. That's it for now, mate.
What? Oh,
can you? Yeah. Turn your thing off, mate.
What's up?
See you later.
Somebody other, right.
He's gone. Right. So what should we do instead then?
Right. If we have a plan that is unique for each property, then we simply install the measures in the order laid out in that plan. So we'd only do the EWI if we also had the funding to move the windows at the same time. Okay. Because if we don't, then it's called a no regrets pathway. In other words, we shouldn't be doing anything now that's going to cause us trouble in the future.
Regrets. I've had a few.
Wow.
So we have one plan for a whole estate, right? Because all those houses on the Craighill are exactly the same. We can have one plan to rule them all.
Well, no, Bill, because they're not exactly the same, are they? They may have been built at the same time, but there are at least 6 archetypes. Plus, every building has its own, unique aspect. Like some are more exposed to wind and rain than others, and some have energy bills twice as high as the next door neighbour, and we have no idea why. every home's different and needs a unique plan for each one. I mean, the plans, to be fair, they might not be massively different, but we still need to look at them individually.
Okay, right. So you've got a plan. What next?
Well, now we need to design the solution. So let's say we've got 20k per property through the LAD scheme for those 200 homes on that estate. So the coordinator says that's enough to reduce heating bills by about half and CO2 by 50%. That would be enough to get them potentially from an EPC band D up to maybe EPC band C, maybe even a B.
20k only gets you there. Straight.
Well, yeah, because the cost of going really, really low at the moment is, you know, it's way over 60, 70k. We can't do it all at once. We don't have the money for that. But we do need a plan for when that money might come in and come online. What we need to do is get things right to start with, then think about the longer term. So over the next decade or so, if you think about it, how much have we budgeted to spend on the repairing and upgrade of those houses?
It's about 20k, yeah. That's new roofs, windows, bathrooms, kitchens, usual stuff.
Yeah. So when we do those things, yeah, we'll have what? Scaffolding, we'll have labour, we'll have floorboards up and lofts accessible. And if we're forward planning that stuff over a decade, it means it'll be cheaper to do this other stuff at the same time.
So you mean I should integrate retrofit into my asset management strategy?
Oh, wow, who's using jargon now?
Sorry, Joy. What's next? Oh, that's right, design.
I think you've started to win him round slowly. But an important point for me to talk about, to make to you here, I don't know if we have any social landlords or the like on the call. We do a lot of these sessions with them. There's a big change that needs to happen around the way they buy things and the way that the government and energy companies fund things. We need all of policy, funding and practice all to be in alignment. PAS 2035 does give you the basis to do that. I'm not going to dwell on these now, they're not terribly relevant, but don't be under the impression that we think everything's perfect from the client side at the minute. It's not. What we do know is that there's a big cost of not complying, not doing things properly. And it was mentioned earlier that there was this scheme in, this is the I think it's Fishwick area of Preston. This was an area retrofitted in 2013 under a government-funded program, cost 5 million. You can see the scale of the problems there from the photos, and they were caused by very defective installation, no design, no ventilation strategy, resulted in widespread damp, mold. Staller went bankrupt. To remediate that so far has cost £6 million, and it's still going on, and it's still climbing. And we don't know what the cost is to the people who lived in those properties, but it's clearly made their lives worse than they were before. So we need to factor that in. And if that seems familiar, we have to ask ourselves the question, would it have been better to have done nothing? And sometimes if, the coordinator's job might be to say, we shouldn't do anything now. We don't have enough money to do this properly now. What we need to be creating are plans that are that pathway to net zero. So we only have to do this once, and we can do it in those stages and get to the point where we've got a decarbonised housing stock. Okay.
Yeah, so design. We are going to invest about, 5 million quid on these properties now. So we are looking for a design solution that's based on something called a fabric first approach.
The what?
So fabric first is about getting your priorities right. So the priority one for fabric first is wrapping the building in insulation to make it airtight. And you do that before addressing any of the building services or renewables. So this means getting the demand for the heat and power as low as possible before you go about installing heat pumps or solar panels or any of that stuff. It also means ensuring adequate ventilation when we wrap that building, because that way we can avoid all those lovely damp and mold problems.
Sean's an Sean's an installation contractor, but he always tells me ventilation isn't his thing. But you can't fault his renderings. It's really first class. Everything looks great.
Yeah. It looks great for a year or so, doesn't it? But I'm not being funny. Have you seen these pictures from Bragall? There's spalling, there's cracking, there's condensation, there's mold, there's damp. It looks a flipping good then, does it? And worse still, it leaves us no further forward in terms of what we're trying to achieve.
Why?
Why? Well, because it's all got to come off again. And we've got to start again, Bill. And in the meantime, real people have to live in these homes.
Hey, I am here, you know. Where is I heard all that. But you make it sound like we'd be better doing nothing at all. I tell you, we do a good job, and we've never been beaten on price.
Well, it's hardly an option, is it? If we're trying to eradicate fuel poverty, achieve our flipping carbon targets and improve the lives of our residents, that's why, look, the only choice here is to do it right.
Okay.
I heard you.
So we've understood the starting point. We've got a plan for the property and a design solution that should work.
Yeah.
Can we get on with it now, please?
Yes.
We can get on with it now, by which he means installing stuff. So you heard there about the fabric first approach. I imagine many of you have heard of that. It's about making a building airtight using insulation. We're looking for a continuous layer of insulation. So we're not looking at doing walls in isolation. We're looking at addressing the roof space, the walls, the windows, the doors, all in one hit if you ideally can. And we're also trying to ensure that those buildings are then adequately ventilated. If we wrap a building up, we stop the air from exfiltrating, then we need to ensure that they're properly ventilated. Another key theme you'll hear about is this whole house retrofit thing. So this is what's recognizing that fabric first is sensible. It's not fabric only. So we need a plan which addresses the fabric, the services and the renewable energy systems together rather than individually. So we're moving away from, solar PV schemes in isolation to them being part of whole house retrofit programs. And then building physics. This is the understanding of thermal performance and moisture risk management. These are big themes in PAS 2035. And if you're not familiar with them, you think you soon will be. And I'd encourage you to do some reading up. So we're nearly there now. We're moving on to step 5, which is the installation piece. And there's not a huge amount to say, because by this point, an installer's job is to install what's been specified and not to change it. They're delivering under PAS 2030-2019, the standard. Their reporting lines are clear from, they are accountable to the retrofit coordinator, but the coordinator doesn't manage the construction site itself. That's down to the installer. They're not allowed to make substitutions or change any specifications without running it through the coordinator. And the coordinator's job effectively is to manage any conflicts that arise and ensure that they're resolved.
The next stage is installation, handover and commissioning. So Sean, you can get stuck in.
Okay, great. So this is business as usual for him. He calls the shots, right?
Well, yes, you're responsible, Sean, for complying with the installer standard PAS 2030, as you know. It's just that this bit now sits within the wider context of this PAS 2035. So now it's all part of the retrofit process. It's not the be all and end all. And the retrofit coordinator will be keeping an eye on everything.
Right, okay, so what if we need to adapt to changing circumstances then?
You mean, what if he wants to sub the specified product for a cheaper alternative or change?
Not necessarily, no.
Well, whatever it is, you're going to need to run it past the coordinator, and he or she will have to involve the designer too. Otherwise, the design solution ain't going to be realised, is it?
Well, it sounds like he's lost control.
No, he's just being asked to do what installers do. With respect, install stuff.
I know my job, Joy. I don't need patronising.
Well, it's the same. Energy assessors are asked to assess stuff. Architects and engineers design stuff. Coordinate stuff.
Yeah.
This is about round pegs in round holes. Look, come on. You wouldn't even question this if it were a new build, would you? The installer is responsible for 3 things, yeah? Installation, commissioning, and handover to the
Handover.
resident.
Yeah,
Right. So how you do that is already laid out in the PAS 2030.
So
But-
why change it?
Well, if you're not applying it for whatever reason, then the coordinator has to step in. But Sean, you're right. You are in charge on site.
Okay, so the buck stops with the coordinator. If it goes wrong, we can blame them.
Excellent.
Well, I suppose the idea is if it doesn't go wrong in the first place, then you don't have to blame anybody. But when we install something, we do need to know it's working as it should be, and that the residents getting the result that they were expecting. So in that sense, then yes, I suppose the buck does stop with them, because ultimately they're in charge.
Yeah.
So, which I guess brings me to the last stage of this then, which is about the monitoring and evaluation.
Sounds like a lot of sensors and the like, very expensive.
Yeah, so we reached step 6, monitoring and evaluation. Now, we touched on who does this earlier and conflicts of interest, so we'll talk about that now. There are 3 types of monitoring and evaluation. Every project is subject to what's called basic monitoring and evaluation, the form of which is a questionnaire, which is completed by the homeowner or the resident or the social landlord, whoever the client is. And if that checks out, if it all comes back and everyone's happy and there's no snags and there's no issues, that's the end of it. The existing retrofit coordinator is asked to do that as part of their job. That's standard. If there are problems, it's escalated to the next level, which is called intermediate monitoring and evaluation. This isn't about installing sensors and the like, but it is about bringing another retrofit coordinator in effectively to take a look at why these problems might be arising. So it's really a review of the coordinator and their application of the PAS in many ways. But if that doesn't work, that doesn't solve the problems identified, then we've got the kitchen sink approach, which is called permanent monitoring. And this is where we might well be having to install all sorts of sensor technology to find out what's really going on, what's really causing these issues. Where we want to get to is a situation where no one can pass the buck.
Not really, and certainly not in the first instance, because it's just a short satisfaction survey initially, just checking that things have been done according to the plan or according to those intended outcomes that we set out at the start, remember?
So all we're doing is checking people are getting what they expected.
Well, yeah, I guess so. And that there's no hidden nasties, no damp or mold or condensation type issues.
And if there are?
Well, if there are, then the coordinator's got to escalate it to the next stage of monitoring. And they have to get another coordinator in so that it's independent. And that just carries on until it's all been resolved.
You mean nobody can pass the buck?
Exactly.
Right, let me see if I've got this right. Are you saying that this PAS 2035 thing is really just about getting people who know what they're doing involved? Having round pegs in round holes and making sure the customer is getting what they're entitled to?
Yes, Bill, yeah.
But that's, well, it's bloody simple. It's a no-brainer. Why would anyone oppose that?
Yes, Bill.
Okay, so he's been persuaded, and we're going to see our final video clip in a minute, which is what the results of that were.
Sean, can you give me an update on the Craggill Estate project, please?
Yeah, gladly. We've had the assessment reports back. Quite surprising.
Oh, no. In what way?
It turns out that every single one of those properties are different from the others. Our coordinator is worth their weight in gold.
So you managed to find one then?
Yeah, well, it was a lot easier than I thought. There's a free service called RetroBook. We post our job on there, and we received 4 responses from fully accredited coordinators, well within 48 hours.
Yeah, and we've run the data collected past our coordinator, and they're working up the medium-term plan for each property. The architects are building a PHPP model for each archetype, and on some, we reckon we could get down to a pretty low level of residual heat demand.
Joy, just in English, please. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. We've done some sums, and the residence home will be warmer and cheaper to heat. Plus, we can decide on what heating system is required rather than over specifying.
I'll tell you what, if I'd have known sooner how valuable some of that testing data would be, I'd have done it years ago. For a start, we know all the existing defects, the leaks, the gaps, and so on. They all need sorting out before we can install stuff. It costs money to put these things right, but short-term pain, long-term gain. Also, I can actually see the best value for money options. And it's not what the software usually spits out at me. Not only that, these medium-term plans are bloody wonderful.
Oh, great. Why?
Well, because not only can I tell you what we should spend money on now, I can also tell you what should spend on money for years to come. See, it gives me a pipeline of work.
Oh, wow. So you're converted to PAS 2035 then, Sean?
Of course, John, it's brilliant. No idea why people didn't say differently. See, I've always been in favour of it, of course. We've always embraced innovation and we've always moved with the times. Apart from the ventilation piece, that's all plain crazy.
Why?
Well, customers just won't pay for it, will they? It's like having a nice car that costs a packet and trying to sell optional extras with it. They're all broke by that stage and won't sign up for any more. That's what they're telling my advisors.
But what are they selling them, Sean?
Insulation.
No, Sean. No, they're selling them condensation. Have they explained that?
No. We could try that.
Look, Sean, I want you to repeat after me. A retrofit project without ventilation is a condensation project. A retrofit project without...
Okay, I get it. I get it. I understand. I really do, honestly.
Okay. So to summarise, PAS 2035 has given us what?
Well, I'll take this. I guess it's allowed us to make better decisions, highlighting risks and how to manage them.
It's put people in charge who know what they are doing and who can't walk away when things go wrong.
It's going to be fewer defects and snags.
It's going to improve the lives of thousands of people. It's going to create jobs locally. It's going to reduce our CO2 footprint.
It means that we can scale up our business knowing there is a pipeline of work for years to come. It means I can invest in my workforce to ensure they are all appropriately qualified.
It means the chief executive is going to get a lot less post.
That's brilliant. Told you so.
Okay, so now we reached the end of our story at Craggyshire and the end of this session. So I'm a few minutes ahead of schedule. I'll stop sharing my screen. Is there anything in the chat that we can address before we take a break? So I can see. Oh yeah, the RetroBook thing. That's something that's a Retrofit Academy service now. Its main purpose is connecting social landlords and local authorities with retrofit coordinators. That's where we're starting with it. So we're working with the Bayes Energy Hubs and people like that who've got all these LADS projects at the minute, want to find retrofit coordinators, and that's what we're focusing on with that. But yeah, I mean, in theory, anyone looking for a retrofit coordinator could post a job in there if they wanted to, and it's free to do that. Are there any other questions? Okay, thanks. In which case, are there any questions people would like to ask verbally? Otherwise, we're going to take a slightly early break, and you're going to be put into breakout rooms where you'll meet some people on this call and you can have a chat to each other if you like. I think you can opt out of that if you'd rather go and get a cup of tea. We're going to, if we're going to finish now, we will meet back. We'll be restarting at 22:03. And when we come back, we're going to have Richard talking to us about the retrofit assessment process and Jonathan talking to us about his experiences of working with customers. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.
Okay, I think everyone's back. David, are you got any questions hanging over from the last session, or are you all done?
I think over to you, Richard.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll all just mute our microphones. There's a bit of kind of feedback coming in. Okay, so my name's Richard Fitton. I work at the Energy House here at Salford University. I'm also a chartered surveyor, and I've been a building surveyor for a significant amount of time, shall we say, before I became an academic. So my feet have always been firmly kind of planted in the retrofit sector, looking around how we treat buildings, particularly fabric measures in retrofit domestic sector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build on what David was talking about around this whole idea of the retrofit assessment in PAS 2035. There is always quite a surprise on people's faces when we discuss how in-depth and all-encompassing, should we say, the retrofit assessment is for PAS 2035. And it is there for a very good reason. It needs to be done. It's quite dangerous not to do it. So, this will take about 20 minutes. I'm going to whiz through some pretty kind of straightforward slides. They're not as exciting as David's, and there's certainly no dramatic performances in there. But hopefully we should end with a kind of good idea of what the actual assessment process is involved with PAS 2035. Because people often get it confused with the domestic energy side of the assessment. And it is that, but it's that plus a lot. Okay, so we're just going to have a quick kind of whistle stop tour through that. There we go. So PAS 2035 is new. Okay, so with new standards come new roles. Just a bit of my background around PAS 2035. I was part of the Each Home Counts review that David mentioned earlier. I speak with Peter Rickaby quite often in terms of changes to PAS 2035. I'm on the drafting board for the new building performance evaluation side of the PAS standard as well. And also I'm in the development panel for the retrofit assessment standard, which will hopefully provide a lot more clarity on what this process is all about. So 2035 is a new standard, and it's not really been stress tested yet, I think it's safe to say. So there is some grey areas still. And David mentioned earlier on that there's some standards writing work is continuing. So, let's keep that in mind, that there might be some movement in these standards and how we do things, but certainly not a great deal. So we're going to look at number 2, retrofit assessor. That's the role that we're going to concentrate on for the next 15 or 20 minutes. Hopefully, for those of you who aren't well versed in what this role is, you probably will be by the end of this, and it is quite all-encompassing. So this is what the standard says. Now, don't worry about reading all this text. The slides will be available, and this is taken verbatim from the standard itself. But really, the job of the retrofit assessor is to provide information about the dwelling that would be used by a retrofit designer or a coordinator, as David's mentioned. So there's quite a bit of work to do, and this isn't, take the DEA thing away, because this is far beyond what a DEA would do. And that's not to take anything away from DEAs. I was involved heavily in the writing of the exams and the standards for DEAs and other roles alongside them. So that's not to do anyone down, but it is DEA plus, shall we say. So we take a look at the dwelling's heritage, architectural features, structure, condition of the building services, ventilation, heating, hot water, lighting, in sufficient detail to say what the suitability of this dwelling is to be improved. So we also need to look at what might stop us doing things. So what we call constraints. So looking at planning permission, listings of buildings, conservation areas, other constraints such as tree preservation orders. There's right to light in there and all sorts of stuff. So I'm from a building surveying background, so this is all kind of second nature to me, and has been for a long time. But there's a lot of things in here that are normal, let's say a normal DEA, may not be totally at ease with. So that's to say that some more training needs to go on. So then we need to look at the construction defect side of things. So leaks, condensation, mold growth, and structural defects. So we need to keep our eyes open for cracks and shakes in timber and things like this that might stop us doing some of the works of the building. So far more detailed than what we've ever done in the past, and clearly to identify anything that's already there. So, to look at the insulation that already is in the loft, or spot cavity insulation, maybe check what type that might be and stuff as well. So, any energy efficiency measure that might already be there. We're also there to do a measured survey. So we take a good batch of measurements, shall we say, about the actual dwelling itself. So we look at the heat loss envelope, including any basements and attics, the dimension of all the building elements, so exposed floors, external wall, roofs, and we take a dimension of all window and door openings as well. So again, for the people who've done domestic energy work, this is definitely the next step. Further to that, we take an in-depth view of the construction of the building in order that someone else, whether that's the coordinator or the designer, can then start to map out the U values of that building. Okay, so we should really be able to build up in our own mind, our own sketchbook, the layers of the wall. So brick, insulation brick, or block, cavity brick, that type of thing, plaster. So we need to have some good ideas of the makeup of that building, and also the moisture properties of that building as well, because these are things that will really kind of go wrong if we don't understand what's there. And identification of installed services, so ventilation, heating, hot water, lighting systems, and air controls. Past 2035 goes into a significant amount of detail about ventilation. Having known Peter Rickaby, who was one of the kind of leading lights in all of this, to say that Peter is a fan of ventilation is probably a very big understatement. So this is really what the assessor should be. So the assessor really is, it is specified that it's a DEA with upskilling. So upskilling of several days, couple of days. Everyone's kind of doing this a little bit different. But if you're working with protected buildings, then you need extra qualifications, and they're listed in the document. And that is clearly a safety net to stop people going overboard on protected and listed buildings. So we talked earlier in David's sessions about this kind of ski slope approach. So the riskier slopes, the A, B, and C. So the easier ones are the A, the most risky ones are the C. In terms of assessment, we think that Path B will contain a lot. Path A would probably be a lesser number depending on your area of work, and C probably a lesser still. So that depends what area you're going to get involved working with. But and they may be subject to change as well, some of the paths over the next year or so. But the path dictates the level and type of work that the assessor must cover on the assessment. I've hugely paraphrased that, but it gives us some ideas of what we need to do when we're on site. So we start off with Path A. So everything needs this. Okay, so how this works is it's Path A, then Path B, you'll do that plus a little bit more, and then Path C, that and that plus a little bit more. So this is a kind of straightforward assessment. So an appraisal of the structure and condition, as we talked about earlier, including services and ventilation. So that means that we have to say what condition the boiler is in, the ventilation is in, and things like that. I'm going to talk about how we do that in a little while. Any site constraints, so listed building, conservation, tree preservation orders. So if there's a tree right in the way that you need to move to either make the PV a success or you need to get something round to do EWI, then we need to check that. Rights to light, everyone has a right to light, but not necessarily a right to a view. Again, that's hugely paraphrased, but people spend the full legal careers fighting right to lights, but we need to consider that. Identify defects, structural, damp and mold related. That's clearly a big one. We would never make a building any worse. We have to make an improvement. A measured survey, including all the windows and door sizes, an RD SAP assessment, and enough data about the structures to calculate approximate U value, identify all building services, including renewables. So path B, we do all of that, but we also take into account an occupancy assessment. The occupancy assessment is a little bit fussy, and I don't think it's very well laid out in PAS 2035, but we can use the same type of occupancy assessment model that we used in the Green Deal, which is a series of questions that we ask the occupant, and that gives us a little bit more detail, and it can actually make some changes to the energy savings that are calculated in the RD SAP certificate as well. But it also asks questions about number of occupants and vulnerable people and things like this that may help the designers do some different type of design work when it comes to that stage. Ventilation assessment, not something that many of us would have done, but it's a full ventilation assessment. Okay, and we need to check that the ventilation is working as well, which is quite interesting, because not many of us would have done that in the past. So path C, so this is the highest risk path. So this looks in a significant more amount of detail. So this really talks a lot more about the air tightness status of the building as well. So we do an air tightness test by a suitably qualified person. We could possibly do infrared surveys or work around smoke pencils to detect drafts and things like this. So we really need to say there that this is a significant kind of deviation from what we've done. And a full condition survey of the building using that's an RICS document there that's quoted in PAS 2035. I'm not too sure if it should have been quoted in PAS 2035, but it is. But that's a really detailed view of how to carry out a condition survey of a property at level 3, according to RICS guidance. I would take that with a slightly more than a pinch of salt, because I think it might evaporate for the next version. But it does tell us something that's quite important. So when we're dealing with these kind of path Cs, it tells us we don't only have to look around my room now, and I can see some things that are wrong with the building, and I can look at this kind of laminate floor that we're on, and I can see it all looks in good order. What this path C asks us to do is potential or hidden defects in areas that are not inspected. So really, we're kind of looking at things like floor voids there and things like that. We should propose the most probable cause of the defects. So this is building surveying stuff, I would kind of say. Outline the likely scope of appropriate remedial works. And sometimes we talk there about cost and certainly time scale, and identify the legal implications of ownership in detail as well. So, this is really a kind of step up to what we might be used to in doing a kind of standard retrofit types of approaches. And like I say, an indication of costs there. So, significantly different to what we're talking about. So this is the assessment routine. So the dwelling features, we look at heritage, architectural features, structure, that there is a standardized template of how we approach that as well, which is quite useful. Then we look at the condition of all the services, the ventilation, the heating, hot water, location of all the services and which area they serve. So, this extract system was serving this area and that area. This heating system was just serving the ground floor or something similar. We look at the lighting condition and any defects there as well. And the location and severity of existing construction defects or leaks, condensation and mold growth, which I think is straightforward, and any installed measures. Then we look at the things that would stop us doing things or certainly make the designer think a little bit more. So planning permission, past or present, what's gone ahead, listings on the building, sites of special scientific interest that may be very local to the building, conservation areas, TPOs, the elevation. So if a house is built high up on a hill, should I say, that's very exposed, then clearly that gives us some room for thought. If it's depressed in a valley near a river, then again that gives us some different ideas about what we might do. The exposure levels, is it very rural? Is it very exposed on a moor side or something similar? Sun, wind, and rain. So we think about which way the building's facing. Is it on the prevailing wind side? Is it constantly battered by rain on this kind of southeast or southwest elevation? The major roads, access to the site itself. Can we get the EWI that we need on these big trucks or whatever down this tiny country track or back alley or something similar. Rights of light. So are we blocking people's light when we do things like EWI? Party wall issues, which again, you could spend your whole life dealing with if you're in that area. But it is to say that if we're disturbing party walls or even garden boundaries, then something needs to be looked at there. And other considerations of adjoining properties, which is a very vague term and probably difficult to interpret, actually. Then we look at this kind of measured survey. So we go around our tape measures, we're doing drawings, we're measuring all the building elements. We're looking at a section of the walls, the walls, the floors, the roof or ceiling, things like that, and the moisture characteristics of those materials as well. That's a big piece of work. That's not going to be done in a small amount of time. Then we look at this occupancy approach we talked about earlier. Then we do this ventilation assessment. So this really is, as the final bullet point on that slide says, we have to get our airflow meters out. So you'll have to purchase an airflow meter and get to grips with it, learn how to use it according to this BSRIA standard, which is a kind of best practice guide the BSRIA publish. And we have to put it on the fan and see if it's actually working. So we can all have extract fans and things like this that may or may not be clogged up or poorly functioning or just not working at all. And we can tick them off on a box when we're doing the survey. But what 2035 asks us to do is actually check them. So are they working? So when you have things like background ventilation, so trickle vents and air inlets, you need to make sure they're all open and working. Single room, positive input, all the different types of ventilation system we need to look at, identify and see if they're actually working. So that's no mean feat. I have to say that it's something that might take a few people by surprise. Where we deemed that we have to do an air permeability test, so a blower door test, then we need a full copy of the report and the results. Then if we're looking at a protected building, so that's what past 2035 in essence calls a listed building, then we have to do a full assessment. So that's a specialist job, I would say, something that needs some training, some CPD, some extra work. It's not something that I probably wouldn't even tackle that kind of job. And a structural survey, a full structural survey, if requested by the retrofit coordinator. And then, we have this series of things that we do as generalities there. We go around the building and we're looking for things that let's face it, are wrong with the buildings. We've got two categories that we can put them in. There's this one section that the first section is, these are things that need to be done before we even think about doing this retrofit. So in my eyes, these have got to be things like dangerous electrics, failing ventilation, condensation, mold growth, this type of thing, the serious things that are pertinent to an energy-based retrofit. And then things that are there, but they're not essential prerequisite to the retrofit work that we're doing or that we think we're going to be doing. So they're two quite important categories there. And we need to make sure that we don't kind of trip ourselves up, because there's this whole batch of things that could need to be done. And back to David's kind of video there, when we go and do this assessment and we get all these reports that say the buildings are all different, and yes, some of them would be suitable, some of them wouldn't. There might also be this pile of kind of category 1 defects that the landlord, the managing agent, whoever it is, needs to repair before we can even look at doing this retrofit. So, that's not an insignificant piece of work that needs to be done there. That's a big job. Depending on the stock that you're looking at, that could be a heck of a list of things to do. So just to kind of round off, there will be a standard, a BS, basically, that will be published alongside the 2035 standard that deals explicitly with both the retrofit assessor role and the assessment process that goes alongside it. I think that will be true of the building performance evaluator as well, and maybe the retrofit advisor, although that's not been clarified yet. So there will be more guidance, but I have to say, if you read 2035 and you read the assessment section, it's pretty cut and dry of what needs to be done. Having kind of trained these retrofit assessors before, in my past, that, you know, there is enough to get out what you need to know. But I think an assessment standard will help maybe make these things crystal clear rather than just quite clear. And that's it really. So, I mean, just brief recap from me is that put the idea of it being a domestic energy assessment out of your mind. It's a domestic energy assessment plus some surveying, plus a measured survey, plus a ventilation assessment, and plus a defects type of section as well, a condition, a kind of a condition survey. So this isn't something that you can kind of take lightly. It's not something that's going to be cheap to do. It's not something that's going to be quick to do. And, you know, in terms of dealing with people as well, then the people need to be aware of the fact that you're going to be looking around that building. I would say, you know, for a 3-bedroom semi, probably a good hour and a half, maybe, for the first ones you're doing. It's not something that you can take a clipboard round and do in 15, 20 minutes. So, yeah, that's it. So has anyone got any questions? I've had the thing minimized, so I didn't see any chat. Let's see if I can open that up.
No questions yet, Rich.
Excellent. That must have been crystal clear then. That's good. Okay.
Rich, let's go straight on to Jonathan, and then that leaves us plenty of time at the end for questions.
Yeah, excellent.
Jonathan, do you want to crack on?
Yeah, hi there. My name's Jonathan Atkinson. I'm from Carbon Co-op, and our retrofit service is called People Powered Retrofit. I'll be talking about that. Apologies, it's another bloke. We don't usually accept invitations to speak on all male panels, and I have a number of very well qualified female colleagues who'd be very happy to step into the breach next time. But yeah, you've got me, I'm afraid. And yeah, I'm going to be talking about our experiences of delivering whole house retrofit service in the owner-occupier context, but there are many kind of overlaps and bits of good practice that are applicable in the other sectors, in other tenures. And it's based on our real world experience as well. So yeah, I'm going to talk about why we would involve householders in the first place. Maybe we should just put them aside and not listen to them. Hope they go away. Going to talk a bit about Carbon Co-op, a bit about People Powered Retrofit, a background. I'm going to ask the question, who are the customers? Who are the clients? What type of people are they? Are they all the same, homogenous, identikit, or are they perhaps individuals? Might be answering my question there. What's important to clients? Because I think that's the question we should be asking, rather than what's important to us as providers. And then I'll finish with some key client considerations and maybe use some examples of things that we used to interact with clients. And I'm really happy to, as part of the Q&A, tackle some more nutty kind of topics and subjects about dealing with clients, because I've got a lot of experience. So just to start with, why involve householders? And I think this, for me, is something that I think is a bit of a step change, and PAS 2035 marks a bit of that step change. Is that in previous times it was somehow considered that it was the house alone that needed to be retrofitted, that it was a building physics issue and the property stood alone, and you might even develop some kind of solutions where you could get a computer or an algorithm and just retrofit every home in Britain and have done with it. I think increasingly it's understood, and it's certainly been our experience, that you do not just retrofit a house, you retrofit a home with people in it and behaviours and priorities and all sorts of things. And so it is essential to involve householders in that process. And that's really one of the really good things about PAS 2035. It acknowledges the role of the householder. It's about creating trust, and people won't listen to you if they don't trust you. And if you don't listen to them, they won't trust you. So yeah, and I think we'll find out about the barriers to householders taking up retrofit, and trust being key one there. It's about facilitating householder decision making throughout the process. So again, it's not about what the computer says or the algorithm says. You know, obviously, as Richard's eloquently outlined, you know, the assessment is entirely part of PAS 2035, but it's also about the householder and helping them make those decisions. It's about progressing projects further so they don't stall, you know, at a very early stage, advice or inquiry or even assessment that they progress through and they convert. It's about having fewer issues all the way through, you know, on site, afterwards, beforehand. It's about getting quicker resolutions to things that do go wrong because all things do go wrong all the time. But that doesn't mean you can't resolve them well. And it's ultimately about better marketing and recommendations, because if a householder has felt listened to, has been involved, is positive about the outcome, they will tell their friends or their family. And ultimately, we need more people to retrofit their homes. And as providers, we want more people to do it with us, or we want them to tell other people in the area so that there isn't any concerns in advance of work's been done. So that's a bit about Carbon Corp, People Powered Retrofit, diving into it. We are a not-for-profit community energy intermediary based in Greater Manchester. We actually work across the Northwest and indeed even across Europe as well now. But we're a member-led organisation, and our members are householders who want to make big reductions in their domestic energy use. Yeah, so ultimately they are our owners, and we're householder-led. We've been going for more than 10 years now. We've carried out a range of different retrofit projects, from commissioning retrofit directly and procuring it and contracting it, to working with householders to train them and offer advice, offer services, offer capacity building, and in a variety of contexts. Our main, I won't lie, our main experience is in the owner-occupier context, and most of our members are owner-occupiers, but we have worked in in social housing, private tenants, and that sort of thing. We work with a number of housing associations, both in terms of their relationship with contractors, but also with householders, but also training up contractors. And People Powered Retrofit really was, it's an evolution of the work we've been doing. It's a distinct end-to-end service for householders to take them from interest through to works completed. And this builds on kind of our experience over the past 10 years and our kind of frustrations with householders getting to a certain stage, but not getting any further. And we were one of 6 BEIS supply chain and retrofit pilot schemes that ran from 2018 until just this March. We're the most northerly by about 200 miles. And a lot of our experience and a lot of our knowledge that we've developed in that, I'll be sharing today. In the process of developing and delivering the service, we're currently working with 60 householders, all at different stages of retrofit. So yeah, it's a very different challenge to kind of a smaller retrofit or architecture practice that might work with just a few over a year. And it's obviously different to a kind of housing association or social housing. And yeah, I mean, I can't speak highly enough of David's presentation on PAS 2035. I loved the video, and I saw there was some comments as well. Thought it was a really great way to explore some of the tensions at the heart of retrofit delivery. Yeah, although perhaps some were characterized to provide, you know, kind of humor and kind of extreme, I actually thought a lot of them are very familiar, which is perhaps a bit worrying. So our domestic owner-occupier retrofit, this is our workflow that we go through with householders. This is actually based on PAS 2035. And although we don't formally register our projects through the Trustmark system, we are harmonizing with PAS 2035. We'd like to move towards that. We don't need to, but we'd like to. And we're also working with people like David and Peter Rickaby, who was mentioned as one of the technical authors, to offer our experience of delivering PAS 2035 in an owner-occupier context to hopefully improve the standard further. But yeah, basically we take householders through advice, We do an energy assessment, basically similar to what Richard's been talking about. We do design development with architectural support, sometimes testing and investigation. We procure contractors for our householders, and we use local contractor networks and supply chains. We do on-site support for the delivery, it should say, with a retrofit coordinator rather than an advisor there. And then we do handover and evaluation at the end. So yeah, I think we can't speak highly enough, really. So who are the customers? Let's get a poll going. I've given you the answers there. Okay, so I'd like to know from you what you think the most common reasons for retrofitting a home are. This could be from your own perspective. It could be from people that you've worked with, your customers or your clients, or just things you've seen on the telly. Why are people commissioning retrofit? Do put things in the chat as well. How are we getting on, Helen? Have we got enough?
Not yet. People are just starting to fill it in.
Okay, maybe I should, you know. I mean, you can tick on more than one thing as well. So it doesn't have to be just one reason why people are retrofitting. You can click on a number. How are we getting on?
About 70% so far voted.
Okay. Should we share it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay. So the most the reasons we think in the room are about getting a warmer home, getting in a more improved home, getting the fabric up to date, greener and more environmental is in there, climate impacts as well, and yeah. There's a few things there. Close. Okay. Okay, so I think there's all valid reasons. These are the motivations we've found, and these are surveys over the last 10 years. So this is one in particular, but it shows the same kind of pattern as the others. So the main ones for us, the clients we work with, are carbon emissions, reducing those, and being in a warmer, more comfortable home. Reducing energy bills is in there as well. And obviously, you know, we can talk about the effectiveness of reducing bills for retrofit. And also, which is something we found in the last 5 years, is about making home more climate resilient. And that's around things like flood risk and, you know, high winds and storms and that sort of thing. So those are the householder motivations of the people we've been talking to. But I guess the point of this is like, who are the clients? Who are the householders? And I wanted to just introduce you quickly to this idea of the innovation curve. The innovation curve is something that was characterized and described in the 50s, but can be applied to a number of things. Let's think of mobile phones, for example. To begin with, you get the innovators on the left-hand side, the early adopters of brick phones and kind of, you know, costly and inconvenient things. Then you get early adopters, you get more people getting interested. They might be, you know, still not the best things in the world, still a bit more expensive, but they're getting a bit more, you know, a bit more tailored. Then you get the early majority and the late majority. So you get more customers, more clients here that are more, you know, of the average kind of people and are interested and have more kind of general motivations. Then you get the laggards at the end who will only do it if they're kind of forced to. And I'm sure we all know a very small number of people who still don't have mobile phones. And this can be applied to retrofit. So I think this is important in understanding who are the clients. And certainly in an owner-occupier context, it's different in social housing, but the owner-occupiers, it's the early adopters and the innovators. And that's why we're seeing people who their motivations are slightly maybe different from the mainstream. It's about environmental concerns, or it's other things. They might be early adopters of new technologies, things like heat pumps. They want to be the first in their street to get that. It's important to understand that, because those are the householders we'll be encountering now. And this is some market research we've done as well, looked at kind of typified their kind of budgets and that sort of thing. The people, the early adopters, they have significant sums of money to spend. So it's around 5 to 20,000, 20 to 50,000. So the budgets are in those kind of areas, rather than the kind of smaller measures, single measures. Again, this helps understand how we pitch retrofit. And finally, personas. You might have seen this come from kind of marketing speak, things like Mosaic and other marketing bits of software. For us, it's really important to understand what type of people we're talking to and what are their motivations and what are their interests. And these are three of the main ones that we've typified during our research project in terms of people that we're working with. It's climate pragmatists, civic-minded retirees, and climate idealists. Climate pragmatists want to do something about climate change, but they understand there are limits and they have a certain amount of money, and they're willing to work with our advice and take our kind of lead on things. Civic-minded retirees might not be influenced by climate change at all. They know that retrofit and investing in their properties is a good thing in and of itself. They're probably involved in different community groups, voluntary groups, faith groups. And they're doing it for the right reasons. And climate idealists are people super motivated by climate change. They want to reduce their emissions to the lowest they can, and they also want to protect themselves from things like high winds and floods and that sort of thing. So it's about understanding the motivations of the householders, the types of people we're working with, the stage we're at in terms of the market and development. So what's important to clients? Well, we've spent a lot of time asking them and a lot of research doing that and a lot of evaluating projects as they go along. So people have said things like, the problem is it's just too technical. I don't care about all the technical side of things. I just want a home that's warm when I put the heating on. And another quote here about the face-to-face relationship contact that can be better. It can be quite a full-on process, retrofit. So people want to basically be able to communicate with a human being. So common barriers that clients face. I've put another poll together. Here we go. Again, you can tick more than one. What are the common barriers that clients face in commissioning retrofit and getting involved in the process? Do they not have enough time? Do they not have access to the technical skills? Do they not have the money? Is it about decision making? Is it too complex? Do they get conflicting advice? Is it about trying to find contractors? Put in your what you think are the common barriers. Maybe if we get up to like 70% again, we can share the findings. Brilliant. Finance, interesting. 81%. 81% people think finance is the key barrier. We've also got things like finding the contractors, conflicting advice, complexity, technical skills. Well, let's see the research we did. Okay, interestingly, finance did not rank in the top 4 reasons for owner-occupiers. And I think, and that surprised us definitely. And certainly when we set out to develop people-powered retrofit, we did a lot of research into financial products and services that we might be able to offer householders. But what we realized, what the conclusion we came to was in terms of our early adopter cohort, those people generally have finance available. I haven't gone into I haven't dived into the demographics, but a number of our householders are towards retirement, so they tend to either come into inheritance, or they might have a pension that's paying out, or some kind of investment that's paying out. They're looking to settle down in their home for a significant period of time, and they're looking to invest in it. We also have a bump around the 30 to 40-year-olds. People are settling down with a new family. Again, they're looking to stay in their home that they're in for a significant period of time and invest in it. And so whilst some people finance is useful, sometimes in extending the scope and scale of the works they can do, it's actually not a key barrier to getting works done. The barriers that we found from people are the complexity and technical detail. I mean, we've discussed this today already about how technical retrofit can be. Difficulty in making decisions. I think sometimes we underestimate how householders know that there are risks involved in retrofit. They understand, they live in their properties, they understand the risks of taking a wall off or taking their roof off, or spending a large amount of money. And in a lot of instances, it paralyzes them and they're not able to move forward. We also found people getting conflicting advice. They might get a consultant come along or an assessor tell them one thing, they get another consultant along and they'll tell them another. And sometimes you get people that are very set in a very specific way of working. They have a measure that they'll always apply or an approach. And it really turns householders off because they feel like they're kind of being bullied into a certain path. And also well-documented discussion, finding contractors and the high quality works, and these are the things that are forming the key barriers to householders moving forward. So how do we overcome them? I'm gonna end with just 3 areas of client considerations that we can think about to kind of help them overcome these barriers and deal with that. So for me, the first thing's about expectation management, about having common set of expectations between client and provider, and a common understanding what could go wrong and when. I mean, my dad is an electrical contractor. His advice to me was always tell them it's going to be awful, tell them it's going to be really disruptive and it's going to be really, really messy. And when it's messy, but not really messy, and when it's disruptive, but not the end of the world, they'll feel better because their expectations have been set appropriately. I think the worst experience we had was when one of our team members told someone, "Oh, this is going to be easy. It's going to be no problems about that," and then it's not. The reality is it's not, and then it's the end of the world. For us, creating a retrofit project brief is really essential, and this has the motivations, the priorities of the householder, the timescales, the budgets. I've included a link to our website with a template, and I'll come on to it as well, show you an example. But also roles matrix, as David outlined, there's different people involved in retrofit, and it's a really positive progression to have a retrofit coordinator out front, but there are lots of different people, and it's really important the householder understands who they all are and what they all do. So this is the brief, this is just a couple of pages or a couple of excerpts, hopefully you can see this. But we fill one of these out with every client that comes through the process. And it's something we have and can refer to and come back to. But it creates that set of expectations that are common between us and them. It's like personal details, what their plans, budgets, timescales, all that sort of thing. And it's a precursor to the assessment. So this is definitely not an assessment, but it gathers some of the information that is useful at assessment stage. I've also included the matrix. It's very hard. You probably won't be able to read this, I'm sorry. But on the right-hand side, you can see essentially the columns are the different people involved in the retrofit process. And the client is one of those because they are involved. We've got client, retrofit coordinator, architect, contractor, etc. And then the stages are down the rows. And then at every stage, or most stages, people have something that they need to do. And on the left-hand side, you can see a detail there. For example, at the advice stage, the client develops a project brief and prepares an overall budget. So, it's having that information in it. This is a really great thing to give to a householder because it kind of emphasizes the fact that it's not a passive process. There are things that the client needs to be doing, but there's also things that other people need to be doing, and this outlines what they are. So, shared expectations, enabling decision making. Again, we said there, one of the key things, how do we make those decisions? Clients, find that it's a real issue. For us, it's about having independent, trusted advice. And I think David mentioned it in the PAS 2035 training, the idea that a retrofit coordinator acts as an independent person, independent in the sense of not part of the contractor, so they're able to have some distance there. We also use retrofit advisors, and the retrofit advisor is the kind of person that guides the householder through the process. And again, so if there are issues with the coordinator on our staff team, there's an advisor, there's someone else there they can work, they can talk to as well. And I think there's a tension here between advocate and expert, and that in a sense part of our advisor coordinator the advisor is the advocate for the householder in our model anyway, and they're there to protect their interests and to kind of voice concerns on their behalf, or to be a kind of person to bounce things off. Whereas the experts there are the coordinators. But I think there is a tension there because in smaller practices, you might have one person doing all that. Sometimes, you know, there's this dynamic where, you know, I'll tell you what to do, I'm the expert, and that can sometimes turn off householders and kind of stop them making decisions. Yeah, and that thing about technical advice and multiple opinions. And in terms of decision making, it's about making, helping them make decisions, offering options, having evidence, giving them a meaningful choice, giving them the data so they can see the basis on which these discussions are made. And then, yeah, new technologies. I think there's a fantastic role here for being able to use different technologies, infrared cameras, digital pictures, reports, data, graphs. We use smart meter data, for example, progress tracking, to help the householders understand where they're at in the process, give them another perspective. So many graphs that householder can take on board, so different ways of communicating information. These are some excerpts from our retrofit home retrofit planner, which is an assessment we do, whole house assessment. Gives you some different ways that we look to communicate information, you know, graphs, charts, arrows. We also have lots of tables in there, but it's trying not to overwhelm the householder, give them different ways of looking at things. Obviously, thermography as well, which is obviously come out multiple times, a very effective way to share information. And yeah, I mean, past 2035, it is both complicated and simple. You know, it's a simple process, it's stepwise, and it uses some common kind of underlying principles. And, you know, as much as possible, we try and communicate that complex information in a very simple way, because it's that interface with the householder that needs to be as simple as possible whilst communicating the complexity of information. At the bottom there, we use just a very simple, where are you, you know, on your retrofit journey? So it orientates householders and know where they're at. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour around householders, around our engagement and involvement with them. We've got a website there if you want to catch up more on the work we're doing. And yeah, happy to answer questions with everyone else.
I'm always so encouraged when I see actual retrofit being talked about rather than talking about doing retrofit. You see the difference. It's fantastic. I also really like the language you're using in that report, which has given me some ideas. So thank you very much. There's quite a few questions that have come through in the chat. Let's start with those. These are sort of for all of us to answer, I think. Michael asks about, he picked up that I think a lot of funding is going to come through local authorities and local enterprise partnerships, and asks if grants to individuals might be severely rationed as a result, and asks how is this likely to affect, etc. So this is clearly in the light of the Green Home Grant Voucher Scheme, which was all the rage and then quickly wiped away. So what sort of impact do you think that's had? Perhaps Jonathan, you could answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the stated rationale from government was to say, oh, we tried Green Homes Grant. There wasn't a lot of demand from householders, so we're putting the money into the local authority delivery schemes. I think that was a little bit of like what I might call arse covering there. I think there very much was demand. There was more demand than they could supply. People like David and others doing sterling job building that supply chain, but it doesn't emerge overnight. And indeed, we wouldn't want it to if we're going to have quite high quality works. I think having talked to BEIS and communications with BEIS, I know they are reformulating policy around owner-occupier retrofit delivery. I don't know what it looks like at the moment. David or others might have a better idea, but I would expect plans, consultations to come out in the next couple of months. So I do think there will be a return to something like the Green Homes Grant, obviously sufficiently disguised and hidden so it doesn't look like they're repeating something they've just done. Yeah, I would expect not everything to come via local authorities. I think local authorities are good in the social housing context. They're good in private rental, or they could be good, or they could be better. But I think there's a well-acknowledged gap there for unoccupiers, and I don't think local authorities are going to cover it, unfortunately.
Okay, fine. It's worth saying for those who don't know, the Local Authority Delivery Scheme, or LAD for short, it is essentially still a grant scheme. They're £10,000 grants that are that go to households that are in fuel poverty, and the local authority's job is to administer those schemes locally. So it does end up still with a homeowner, or well, with a resident anyway, but in a different way from the Green Home Voucher Scheme, where it was about members of the public directly applying for vouchers. Well, I thought it was their installers applying for it, wasn't it? It was all a bit crazy, but anyway. Also, there was an interesting comment, a question about DIY, which I think is a really good question. You know, is this something, I mean, I wouldn't dream of doing any retrofit to my own home because I have 2 left hands and I'm right-handed. But, you know, do we think that good DIYers could also make good personal retrofitters? And is that something we want to see more of? Or should it always be left to the experts? Richard, perhaps you could come in on that one.
So it all comes down to what they're doing, doesn't it? You know, if you look at the paths A, B, and C, the low risk stuff, you know, the loft insulation, things like that, no problems with that. But if it's when we start to talk about a medium-term plan and things like that, and we're doing things in the right order and we're doing things for the right reasons and stuff like that, that's when it can maybe get turned into people just putting PV on the roofs like we all did and things like that, whereas not actually saving energy. So, yeah, I think it's a really valid point. And there should be some, you know, maybe government-backed or EST type of guidance along DIY. There are some documents, but they're few and far between, and certainly nothing that's comprehensive. It's a good idea. I like it.
Interestingly, some of the most respected retrofit people out there are people who started off doing their own homes, not necessarily as DIYers, but with their own retrofit projects, and have then learned the hard lessons as they've gone.
I was going to make that point exactly. Also, especially with the kind of early adopters, and maybe beyond that as well, we've had a lot of demand for people being able to do certain stuff themselves, like air tightness. And for example, we're doing one where it's a deep retrofit. There's IWI, external wall, heat pump, and the householder is doing the air tightness and doing their floors, and then professionals doing the others. Our retrofit coordinator is providing on-site training for the householder and for the contractors. So there's a role there, you know, where the coordinator can like go over to that sort of stuff.
Yeah, fantastic. Sorry, I'm smiling because Michael Corcoran was hold up that book again. I know that book very well. I have a copy of that. The Haynes Manual, effectively, for home insulation. We developed a course which drew upon a lot of that book. It's a little out of date, Michael, but it's very good.
It terrifies me.
It's not one for the faint-hearted. I mean, one of Peter Rickaby's favourite sayings is retrofit isn't rocket science, but it is complicated. So it's not standard DIY. You know, it's not jet washing your patio, is it? At the end of the day, and it's very easy to make some mistakes that are really going to backfire badly. There was a question earlier about, now Gordon asked, will the various accredited courses be identified by the end of the webinar? When you say accredited courses, Gordon, are you talking about what training you'd need to do to become an advisor or a coordinator or an assessor? Is that what you'd like to know?
Yes. Can you hear me, David?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. It basically, yes. This is the retrofit is completely new to me. I'm a member of the Chartered Association of Building Engineers, architectural background. My core work revolves around home extensions, remodeling, upgrading. I've got some upgrading projects on at the moment, and I suppose I'm doing it based on past experience, knowledge of building fabric, But this as a if you like, as a discipline, I was very interested in the roles that you are defining, And I have got friends who are in housing association, building management, and I, to be honest, I actually see this as a potential role for me in the future in some form. You know, and it's also something that I would like to be more knowledgeable on.
Okay, that's brilliant. I think I'm probably best placed to answer that one. The PAS is quite bold actually in the way it's done this, but it says that if we're going to have people in these roles, in these professional roles, they must hold an appropriate qualification to demonstrate their competence. And eligibility for those qualifications also sometimes requires previous experience of some sort, as you'd expect. And the courses and training and qualifications required from courses that take a couple of days. So the retrofit advisor role is a level 3 City and Guilds course, which takes around about 3 days to complete, I think. To the other extreme, well, the middle ground, I suppose, is the retrofit coordinator, which is the one we offer. The Retrofit Academy offers at the moment, which is about a 4-week full-time course. If you do it full-time, people tend to do it spread out over 6 to 12 months, but in stages. There's a lot involved in it. But the good news for you as an architect or a CIBSE accredited professional, whatever, the retrofit designer role, you're not required to hold additional qualifications. You are simply required to be a registered architect or a registered building services engineer or whatever the appropriate registration is. It does list them. And that's very deliberate because whilst you may have a bit of a knowledge gap on retrofit, that could easily be filled by doing a course like ours, for example, or there are others available. But we don't, you've already been to university and design school or whatever it is for years and years. So no one's proposing to re-educate architects and the like. We need more and more of you to come into the sector, and you will have a choice really of being a designer only, or really the most common format would be to be a designer and coordinator, which I think is a service that a lot of owner occupiers would want that role combined, which is absolutely fine. The PAS allows for that. You can also be a surveyor, and you could offer essentially what Jonathan Services is offering now, a one-stop shop really around the assessment, the advice, the coordination and the design. So there's a big opportunity there for designers. Did I get that right, Jonathan? Richard, you got anything to add? I didn't mention assessor training. Rich, you might want to pick up on that.
Yeah, I think you picked up most, David. There's a list of all the standard organisations, Gordon, in the PAS 2035 document. So SIAT's in there. I think CABE is in it. So yeah, take a look there. But yeah, like David said, it's the aim is not to exclude; it is to include. Very, very much. I mean, yes, you might have to do some CPD around the things we talk about, but there's no one on this call that knows everything. So yeah, it's a good starting point.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
I was going to say I'll do that. And to be honest, somebody mentioned it before, and it's something I haven't done. Is to actually read the PAS 2035. And as I say, I suppose like many designers and specifiers, we, I suppose, are cobbling our way through it most of the time, because we're specifying based on our own reading from product, technical information, experience. Whereas I'm seeing this as a more, as you say, a more defined skill.
Yeah. Okay.
There's an interesting question come through about what if it all goes wrong with the best will in the world? Does the retrofit coordinator take responsibility for everything? So maybe there's a discussion about liabilities there.
Yeah, this is quite a big theme, and it does put, at the minute, that very issue is putting quite a lot of people who've trained to be coordinators off practicing being a coordinator, and they should be reassured really. The whole idea with the PAS, and the videos refer to this, is that it's about, getting away from this culture of blame and, delivering projects that work. And in most projects, as we said, retrofit's not rocket science, but it is complicated. If you follow a set of simple rules, such as do the assessment properly, create a plan, stick to the plan, and install what's in the plan. There's far less that can go wrong. It's for those process reasons that projects fail. It's very rarely down to, a technology not being fit for purpose or what have you. So the simple answer, so it's quite a long-winded answer to the question. The retrofit coordinator is responsible if it's a PAS compliance issue. That's the reason that's found to be the failure. So if they haven't done their job properly and the independent monitoring and evaluation says this is why that's happened and it's someone not doing the job properly, yes, it does sit with them. There will be lots of people who've got the retrofit coordinator qualification out there working for companies who've made a lot of money out of not doing things very well, actually, who will be looking to cut all sorts of corners, and on their heads be it, because that role, a retrofit coordinator, professional role, does come with that professional accountability. So it's not just about having a piece of paper, it's about doing it as a professional should, really.
What I might want to add there is, and I know there's a lot of architects on the call, like it's no different from the traditional kind of liability chains that sit within existing, construction contracts. If an architect should be, insured for their, PI insurance for their design work. What we're not suggesting, or we don't do it, and I don't think anyone else is suggesting that a householder contracts via a retrofit coordinator with contractors. As normal, a householder will have a contract with a contractor or set of contractors, lead contractor, however that is. The retrofit coordinator sits alongside the householder like any other consultant would do, offering their consultant services. I know there might be other models where the retrofit coordinator sits elsewhere, but certainly in ours there. So the liability chains are the same. If there's plans and drawings and technical design, it sits with the designer, retrofit designer. If it's to do with construction and installation, it sits with the installer. If it's to do with the materials, it sits with the, and so on. And as David says, what does the coordinator own? They own the process, So if there's a fault with the process, or something they've put that liability chain back to front or what have you, God forbid, that's maybe something that sits with them. But those other things, the things that usually keep people awake at night, sit with those standard kind of job roles.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I think that's all the questions in the chat. Are there any more questions people would like to put to anybody directly? In fact, no, sorry, there is one more. It was directly to Jonathan, but it's an interesting one. Selma asked about what your experience of trying to sell ventilation to householders was. How do you go about doing that?
I mean, ventilation, I do agree. There was a discussion about Peter Rickaby being obsessed with ventilation. Now, like, I see so many health conditions, and there was a little bit in the video where it was like, the household, they're not opening the windows. I see so many health conditions that can be linked to ventilation. I myself have allergies in the autumn, and I know now that it's around ventilation. And ventilation is quite, I think when you get down to it, it's quite instinctual, and it's quite kind of, you're going to seal up your house, you want to be able to breathe. You're suffering from these different conditions, potentially there's a link to ventilation. So ultimately, and especially in a damp city like Manchester, ventilation sells itself. I mean, and for me, it's about having proper communication within the team, so people understand when they're out in, doing assessment or what have you, and that does ripple through. We do workshops for householders on ventilation, but yeah, I'm probably as obsessed as Peter is.
Yeah, I've actually visited a retrofitted home in Manchester. It's Charlie Baker's. I'm sure many of you have been there. It's a super home that he opens up to show people. But one of the things that really struck me when I was there was the quality of the air in every room. Compared to my house, which is new build and fairly airtight, not well ventilated, it was really striking. Okay, so any further questions?
Yes, there's a question. Okay, it's about, you'd have to be on site 24 hours to check that nothing's going on dodgy with contractors. So that it's not surprising that coordinators won't take responsibility. So I think maybe talking about the QA framework is probably the way to address that. Do you want to talk, or I can?
Yep, go ahead.
I think so. Okay, for a retrofit coordinator, and it's really good. This is a really good element of PAS. How do you ensure good quality in terms of installation? And yeah, it's about having things like PAS 2030 and all the stuff around installers, but it's also about having a quality assurance framework. And you know, there's a great process-led kind of approach to that in there. Being very, very simplistic about it, it's about having tick boxes that say, when installing this measure, I have done these things. Yeah, that's the installer does those, and taking pictures. And you know, use of digital cameras and technology and mobile phones now has transformed this area. So you're required as an installer to self-assert that you have done these things at this stage, and to show photo documentary that you've done that. Now align that with regular inspections from the coordinator, and potentially toolbox talks around certain things as well. Again, all like well timed in terms of the different measures, and you've got a quality assurance framework there. And you know, I can speak from experience of doing very large programs with multiple houses going on at the same time, and from many years back, that it's a very effective approach. And it's not one where if a God forbid an installer's, you know, deliberately deceived or done something, you know, it can be picked up, but that's not the retrofit coordinator's liability either. You know, you set out a framework, the installer works within the framework, it's set out in the contracting and the tendering phase. So contractors know what they're signing themselves up to. There's no like hidden clauses here. There's no catching people out. You know, everyone's clear about it and why it's important. And, you know, for me, it's a great process, and it does have a verifiable impact as well.
Yeah, agreed. It leads on to the follow-on question. Well, Andy Barrow's asked about how installers engage with coordinators and retrofit companies. We'll come on to that, but there are some cowboys in this sector, and they tend to be. I mean, there are cowboys in every sector, but you know, there are some cowboy builders, there's cowboy installers. Avoid them. If you get a bad feeling about them, avoid them. I don't think PAS 2035 is needed to tell you that, really. There are some really good ones too, and no doubt, you know, we do have a real problem with not having enough good quality builders, a good quality supply chain at scale, and that's something that, you know, CITB and the government really need to address. We're hundreds of thousands short in some trades. There's no doubt about that. But there are some really good people out there, and I'm sure Jonathan and so the Retrofit Academy, you know, if we hear of good people, we like to share. So if you need recommendations, there are people you can ask for help. Coming on to Andy's question, how can installers engage with retrofit companies? That's not sure. What do you mean by a retrofit company? Are you talking about sort of getting involved with managing agents and people like that who might have work to give? Andy, if you're there, we should clarify that. In terms of retrofit coordinators, the RetroBook service potentially can do that. It's certainly a way if you can, but we're keeping it fairly focused on social housing at the minute, just as we get it moving. Okay, all right, so Carbon Co-op would be a retrofit company. So how do installers get involved with you, Jonathan?
We have a page for installers on our website, which I can quickly find, where you can just drop us your details and tell us what you do. And we've got like a network of installers. We put people on our CRM, so it's kind of maybe implicit in the question, but the way we do procurement is that we help the householder procure. The retrofit coordinator runs that process on behalf of the householder. They make the decisions, and we go out to procurement. We go through a two-stage process, and we involve contractors in that process. We're also proactive as well. We offer things like training and CPDs and that sort of thing. So we're really up for, you know, working with people locally. I would also say Greater Manchester, trying to do more to engage contractors in the area to kind of build networks with the various different agencies, the Growth Hub and people like that. So there's all sorts of different ways in. Yeah, and also I guess, yeah, as David said, you know, if you want to engage directly with retrofit coordinators, there's database, shows you who's out there, and there's this book as well, you know.
Yeah, great. Fantastic. I also mentioned Retrofit Works for people who are looking. If you're a small company and a bit daunted by the whole world of retrofit and all this compliance stuff, Retrofit Works is a cooperative of installers, assessors, and everyone else who sort of pull together the little guys and bid in for some fairly large value contracts. So that I'll put a link in to that too. But the Northwest Carbon Co-op are clearly leading the way here. So couldn't be easier by the sounds of it, just contact them. Just before we finish off, we've got one final question from Michael asking about whether is a view emerging that on a fabric first principle, we are likely to see two-phase retrofits, phase one of insulation, phase two of heat pump installation. I think that's very likely. And in fact, we've just done specification on a big job for a social landlord, which took exactly that approach. Do you got, Jonathan, Rich, do you think that's likely to be common?
We get the unfortunate similar replication to the PV panels where people want to have something shiny on their roofs. Yeah. They also want a heat pump before the necessary demand reduction. So that's part of our education and awareness building with householders to kind of make that case that if they have a limited amount of budget, they need to reduce demand first. But definitely phased approaches as part of a medium-term improvement plan. So that there's a long-term approach or medium-term approach, and they're not like replicating, pulling things out, having to make changes later down the line. That there's phases, but as part of our plan. Sorry, Richard.
No, I agree. We had the same issues when the Tesla Powerwall first came out. Everyone just wanted a Powerwall. Why do you want it? Well, it's a Tesla Powerwall. So it's not going to do anything in terms of energy for you and things like that. So yeah, people do this, but we also have to appreciate the fact that some people can't afford to do everything at once. And that's the whole point of the medium-term plan is we have this path. Hopefully, if we can sell the medium-term plan, then that might help us with the fits and starts of the government dish out of money that keeps happening at irregular or regular intervals. So yeah, I think that's where we're at. If we can get the medium-term plans working, then and what we haven't mentioned is the fact that all of this should be lodged somewhere in some kind of centralized database, these kind of household passport types of things, that if David moves out of his house, he doesn't have to do all this again. That you can log in, get the passport process up, and then find out what the plan was for David's property.
Yeah, that is the idea. And Trustmark perhaps need to do more to raise awareness of that. It is happening actually, but on a very small scale at the minute. Okay, I have been asked just to give Richard a minute to talk about next week's session. Just before I do that, just to let you know, the Retrofit Academy is, we're in receipt of some government funding at the minute to offer a course called Understanding Domestic Retrofit. It's a level 2 nationally recognised qualification awarded by the NOCN. And it's a very good course we developed. It takes about 3 days to complete, and then there's an exam at the end of it. We had 1,000 places available on that. We're down to our last 100. And it would be a very good way of, particularly if you're already one of those people very comfortable and knowledgeable about retrofit, don't do it. But if you're more at the start of your journey, it's a very good place to start. So I'll pop a link to the application for that on the chat. And Rich, would you like to talk about next week's session, please?
Yeah, this one will take 1 minute. So next week, we talked a lot about how we do retrofit up to now and kind of the whys and the wheres. So next week is the session I'll be leading, which is about how we measure the performance of retrofit. So was it good? Was it bad? Was it indifferent? The various different ways we can do that. We'll be looking, majority of the time in that session, we're going to look at the more modern ways of doing it. So these are things that we can actually do quite quickly, quite cost effectively, without any challenges to the residents, i.e. taking them out of the building for 2 weeks while we fill it with a world of scientific equipment. So I'm going to bring some of our Energy House kind of working partners with us, and we're going to say how we can do these things quickly, cheaply, cost effectively, and because I think that's where we need to go. We can't take £1,000 to do every evaluation that we do. We should be able to get this sum of money down a lot. So that would be next week, the same time, the same place. Nigel will be sending out an invite. So yeah, that should be quite an interesting session and probably follow on from this quite nicely.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'd encourage you to attend that. Let's just finish with our final poll, if we may, Helen, please, if you could share it on screen. Thank you very much. So we'd just like to know 2 questions. How has your understanding of PAS 2035 increased as a result of the session? Let us know which of those applies to you. And which of the PAS 2035 roles do you consider it likely to be the right fit for you? You can only, I'm not sure if you can choose multiple on these or not. Do so if you can. If not, choose the one that's you think is most likely to be right for you. And then finally, do you think your business will get involved in PAS 2035 retrofits? I'll give you a few minutes. A few seconds rather, and then we'll share the results. And we're going to finish on time, which is great. And there we go. So that's some encouraging numbers. So 68% of you have had a 75% or more increase in your knowledge of PAS 2035. That's great. And no one said less than 25, so that's good. Which of the PAS 2035 roles do you consider it likely? So, okay, well, we were told a lot of you were from a design background, architectural background, so perhaps shouldn't be surprised by that. Then quite a few saying advisor, assessor, and coordinator. Not so many installers here. Okay, I will say with coordinator at the minute, if you are, for any reason you are not in work at the minute, there is a lot of demand for retrofit coordinators. In fact, we have people at the minute, employers saying to us that they will pay for people to train and pay for their insurance and. So just in case that's of interest, please get in touch with us. And then finally, do you think that your business will get involved in PAS 2035 retrofit? So it's about 50-50. No one's saying no, you won't, but 50% saying not sure, and the similar numbers saying yes, definitely, or yes, we will get involved. So hopefully in the course of these sessions over the next few weeks, that will help build your knowledge and understanding and network and your confidence, and you'll want to give it a go. It is an interesting time in retrofit right now. I think the government keeps trying things which fail, which is really frustrating and gives us a bad press. But the standards and initiatives like Jonathan's are very much sort of the bedrock of a more stable future, I think. So hopefully you will want to get involved. Hope we've covered all your questions. Thank you very much to Jonathan and to Richard for their contributions, and to Helen and the team for organising. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.